did not think much about first dates. I kind of just roll up, hope for decent food, and try not to overthink whatever happens after. That night started the same. I walked into this casual diner spot that smelled like fries mixed with too much cleaning spray, and I spotted Ashton waving at me like he had been waiting forever even though I was only 2 minutes late. The place was kinda bright, the seats squeaked, and the music felt like some random playlist on shuffle. I sat down, thinking this would be chill. It took about 10 seconds before everything felt weird. Right after I got settled, he kept glancing over my shoulder. Not subtle. I turned around slowly, and there was this girl sitting 2 tables away, staring at us like she was watching her favorite show. Her eyes did not blink much, and she had her arms crossed like she was guarding something. I thought maybe she recognized him and did not know how to say hi. I asked him who she was, and he calmly told me she was his ex. The casual way he said it felt unreal, like telling someone the weather. I just stared, waiting for the joke, but he was not joking. Instead, he started talking about how he stays close with all his past partners because he believes in building connections forever. He explained that inviting her to watch our date was normal and respectful because she wanted to support him. I kind of lost track of what he was saying because the idea of someone watching me chew on a burger while silently judging felt like the worst date show I never agreed to be part of. The fries tasted like cardboard at that point. He then leaned back and asked if I would be open to joining his relationship with her. He said it like he was offering a free upgrade on a phone plan, all smiles and calm. I was trying not to make a face, but inside my brain was doing cartwheels. I glanced over at her again, and she smiled, but it was not comforting. More like a teacher forcing a grin when the class is out of control. I wondered if they practiced expressions at home. The whole thing felt like I stepped into a weird documentary. The conversation after that did not recover. Instead, he kept describing how great their partnership system worked. They had schedules, rules, and weekly check-ins about feelings. He said adding me would strengthen their lives. He kept saying strengthen like he was recruiting me into a club. I tried keeping my eyes on my food, but it was like he wanted an answer right then. The ex just sat there, listening, sometimes scribbling on a small notebook. I pretended not to see it because I did not want to know what she was writing. Probably my chew speed rating. When the food arrived, he explained that they always order the same meal so neither of them feel different. He said he ordered for us too. I looked at the sandwich and wondered what kind of relationship rules control toppings. At that moment, I thought about standing up and just walking out, but I was trapped between wanting to be polite and wanting to bolt. He kept talking about unity, harmony, and connection like a brochure for a retreat. At one point, a server came by and asked if everything was all right because maybe my face gave away how weird it was. Before I could answer, Ashton jumped in and said things were perfect and we were discussing future plans. His ex nodded, scribbling faster. I started thinking maybe they were building a file. The idea kept bouncing around in my head. I pictured my picture on some board with string connecting to weird bullet points like how many napkins I used. I tried changing the subject by talking about movies. He instantly shifted back to the topic of joining them. He said I seemed compatible because I arrived on time and I wore matching socks. Yes, he noticed that. The ex scribbled again. I wanted to slam my head on the table gently. The rest of the diner seemed normal. People laughing, eating, living their basic lives, while I was trapped in some experiment. I wondered if this happened to other people or if Ashton invented a whole new level of awkward. The ex finally stood up and walked to our table. She hovered behind me, reading something from her notebook, then whispered to Ashton. He nodded and she went back to her table. He then told me she approved of me. Hearing that made my stomach drop, because being evaluated by a stranger silently judging my chewing might be the worst compliment ever. He kept smiling like we were sharing some beautiful moment. I pulled out my phone, pretending I got a message. I scrolled nothing. He noticed and said he appreciated honesty. I ignored that and tried to breathe normally. He talked about how joining them would not change my life too much. I would get to be part of their weekly planning sessions. He said he would handle finances and outings. She would handle the emotional check-ins, and I would get to take notes sometimes. That was my rumored role. Note-taker. I felt like a new intern at a company I did not interview for. I started wrapping things up, telling him I had to wake up early. He nodded and said he would have his ex text me with the details. That sentence made me freeze. I asked why she would text me. He said she handled communications because he liked to disconnect. My brain felt tired. I stood up, thanked him for dinner in the most robotic way possible, and walked out. He waved happily. The ex watched, writing more. My spine felt like it was tense the entire walk to my car. When I got home, I checked my phone. 3 messages from a number I did not know. It was his ex welcoming me and sending a long list of expectations. I blocked the number, dropped my phone on the bed, and just sat there staring at my wall for a while. I thought maybe I attracted weird situations, but that I decided this one was beyond normal weird. It felt like I nodded my way into a cult interview. I never went back to that diner. Every time I pass a place with squeaky seats, I think about notebooks and matching socks. I thought about deleting every photo on my phone just in case. Nothing traumatic happened after, but I still think about how they looked so organized, planning their lives with charts, waiting to add me like another column. I hope they found someone who liked schedules and silent watchers, but it was not me. I kept going out on other dates, hoping for something simple, like a meal without surveillance. I never planned on going out with Kinga. It sort of happened after a friend thought we would get along because we both liked goofy movies and cheap street food. I said sure because I was bored and honestly wanted something to do after school that did not involve scrolling on my phone. We met at this cafe near a bus station where the seats were all mismatched and the menu board had half the letters fallen off like someone gave up halfway. I walked in and spotted him waving, looking way more serious than the place deserved. Right away, the vibe felt strange, like I accidentally walked into a job interview nobody warned me about. We ordered drinks and sat near the window where we could see buses splash muddy water at people walking by. King just sat up straight, hands folded, eyes locked on me like he was scanning my thoughts. I figured maybe he was shy, but then he started talking about how he believed the best relationships are built on structure. His voice sounded like he practiced it, like he was about to present a slideshow in his head. I sipped my drink, trying to follow along. He said partners needed clear roles. His role was to work, and the other person's role was to stay home. He said it like he was telling me the sky was blue. I thought he was joking. I waited for his face to shift into a grin, but nothing changed. He kept going. He said if we dated, I would have to leave my job. He explained I should live at home, clean, manage chores, and wait for him to get back. I felt my face pull back automatically, but he kept talking like I agreed. He told me working outside ruins balance and distracts people from relationship tasks. He called them relationship tasks like that was normal. I blinked at him, trying to process what century he thought we were in. The cafe smelled like burnt toast, and some loud guy laughed near the counter. Everything around us felt regular, but his words sounded like a rule book written by somebody who never met another human. I asked what exactly my days would look like, and he laid out this whole routine. Wake up early, cook breakfast, clean the kitchen, maybe do laundry, then wait for him to come home for lunch. He said he would return to work after eating, and then I would cook dinner and have chores prepared. He also mentioned I should not talk to other people too much because attention should be focused at home. I stared at my drink and imagined pouring it on my head just to end the conversation. He did not ask what I wanted. He did not ask what I liked. He just explained. He looked calm, like he thought he was offering me something amazing. He pulled out a notebook showing what looked like a weekly schedule. He had written down potential chores, estimated times, and even grocery lists for someone he never met until today. He said his plan was designed to prevent chaos. I kept nodding because my brain was too overwhelmed to form words. Every nod felt like a mistake. It got worse. He told me he already thought about how many kids we would have and how he wanted full control of finances. I shifted in my chair, feeling trapped even with the caf door wide open. He said my income would make things unbalanced. That phrase got stuck in my head. Unbalanced, like me having a job would destroy everything. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice, saying he did not want a partner distracted by career dreams. I looked at the bus outside and imagined just hopping on, letting it take me somewhere random. Anywhere but here. A server came by and asked if we wanted anything else. Kinga ordered a slice of cake without asking if I wanted any. That felt symbolic somehow. While waiting, he started explaining how his parents had the same dynamic. He said his mom did not work and was the most fulfilled woman he ever saw. He said she never complained because she had purpose. Something about the way he said purpose made my stomach turn. It sounded like purpose meant doing everything he did not want to do. The cake arrived, and he took the first bite while talking about how friends would also be a distraction, so I should not hang out often. I pictured myself stuck at home alone, waiting for someone who controlled everything. I thought about Anjal, my friends, the things that made life interesting. None of those fit into his plan. I felt this quiet panic building because part of me worried he would not let this date end politely. I kept glancing at the door again. He then said he wanted weekly reviews where he would evaluate chores and talk about improvements. Improvements. That word echoed in my head like a broken bell. He used it so casually. I wondered if he thought people ran like dishwashers. The more he talked, the more I realized he believed this was logical, not controlling. He thought he was being reasonable, like handing me a perfectly drawn blueprint. He explained he would handle big decisions because too many voices create disorder. He smiled at me, and something about that smile felt rehearsed. I asked what would happen if I refused to quit my job. His face dropped slightly, like I asked the wrong question. He said relationships only work if both sides commit to the structure. He said someone refusing means they do not care enough. That sentence flipped a switch in me. I cared about a lot of things, but not enough to abandon everything. I tried staying calm, sipping my drink slowly just to give myself an excuse not to answer right away. People around us chatted about random things like movies or homework. Their conversations sounded like freedom. I felt like I was sitting inside a tiny cage. I looked down at his notebook again. He had estimated times for chores like 20 minutes for dishwashing, 35 minutes for sweeping. He listed grocery items and assigned weekly budgets. He did not even know what food I liked. I wondered how many dates he tried showing this to, and if anyone pretended they liked it. He talked about date structure too. We would hang out only on certain days. He said if I had hobbies, I should keep them minimal to avoid cluttered routines. Cluttered routines felt like code for having a life beyond him. My brain started building exit plans like a spy. I thought about pretending to get a phone call. I thought about leaving for the bathroom and jumping out a window, but we were only on the first floor, so that would be dramatic for no reason. He asked if I had any questions. I nodded again, then paused. I asked why he thought I would even consider all of this. He looked at me like I asked why water was wet. He said once people understand order, they never go back. He said I looked like someone who needed direction. That sentence hit me wrong. He did not even know me. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, not angered exactly, just disbelief. I pushed my chair back and told him I needed to go. He tried to hand me a printed schedule. Yes, printed. I refused it. He said I should think about it overnight. I walked out into cool air that felt way better than anything inside that cave. The bus stop smelled like exhaust, but even that felt nicer than hearing one more word about chore charts. On the ride home, I stared out the window feeling weirdly tired. Everything outside looked normal. Cars honked. People crossed streets. Someone played loud music from their window. Life felt full again. When I got home, there was no message from Kinga, but the next morning, he sent a giant text explaining how benefits of not working include peace and stability. I did not reply. I just blocked the number. Later, my friend asked how the date went. I just told them we were not compatible. I did not even know how to explain the schedule, the chores, the daily routines. It sounded unbelievable when spoken out loud. Days passed, and sometimes I imagined his notebook sitting somewhere with empty spaces waiting for chores I would never do. I still go to that cafe sometimes, but I sit on the other side near the back. The chairs still do not match. The toast still smells burnt. But at least there is no one trying to reorganize my whole life around laundry. The night started out like something normal. Jack had picked a small Italian place that smelled like garlic bread from the parking lot. The lights were low, the tables close enough that everyone could hear bits of other people's conversations. I remember thinking it felt warm and kind of safe, like one of those old restaurants that's been there forever. He'd shown up early, already sitting at the table when I got there, phone face down, hands folded, smiling like he'd been planning something. At first it was fine. He asked about my day, talked about work, made jokes about the waiter mispronouncing things. But after the menus got cleared, the questions started changing. It wasn't the usual small talk anymore. He leaned in like he was about to share a secret, but instead asked how much I made every month. I thought he was joking, so I laughed. He didn't. He waited for an answer, and I remember how heavy that silence felt. When I dodged it, he switched tactics, asking if I had student loans, credit cards, savings, or any hidden expenses. It felt like a job interview disguised as a date. He said it was just curiosity, something about transparency being important early on. He started listing how he handled his own money. He talked about how couples who combine their accounts early build trust faster. He made it sound like some sort of efficiency project, not a relationship. He even brought up charts on his phone, like he'd been thinking about this a lot before even meeting me. He said joint accounts were proof of commitment, like people who didn't do that were holding back emotionally. The waiter brought food, and for a second I thought the topic would die, but Jack just used a break to pull up a spreadsheet. Actual numbers. He said he could help me organize my financial life. He wanted to see my pay stubs, said he could help find ways to optimize things if we combined accounts. He said couples who do that save more money, buy homes faster, and avoid trust issues. It was so methodical it made my skin crawl. I kept trying to steer things somewhere else. I asked about music, travel, random stuff. But every time I tried, he circled back to the same theme. Money, control, merging lives. He said efficiency was sexy. That's the word he used. Sexy. He said emotional clutter came from separate accounts, and that to become one should apply to finances before anything else. I started realizing that for him, this wasn't just a quirky belief. It was a rule, a line he expected anyone he dated to cross without hesitation. He didn't notice how uncomfortable I was, or maybe he did and didn't care. He talked about how his last relationship failed because his ex wasn't transparent. He said she'd hidden small purchases, and that betrayal like that ruins everything. He said honesty wasn't about words but numbers. I remember nodding just to keep things moving. It was easier than arguing. When the bill came, he grabbed it instantly, scanned it, calculated tip, and said we should split it evenly since it's fair. Then he said that once we combined accounts, he'd handle dinners from then on, that I wouldn't have to worry about it. The way he said it sounded more like a takeover than a kind gesture. I didn't argue. I just wanted the night to end. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have been. He walked me to my car and started talking again about next steps, like we'd already agreed to something. He said we should go to the bank together that weekend. He already picked one out, said they had a good joint account policy. I remember my hand on my car door handle, him standing there smiling, waiting for a yes. I said I'd think about it. He said that was fine, but that it'd be strange if I hesitated too long. Then he hugged me and said, "Efficiency builds love." Those were his last words that night. Driving home, I tried to make sense of it. I replayed everything, wondering if I'd misunderstood. Maybe he was just overly logical. Maybe he didn't realize how intense it came across. But then I thought about the way he said transparency. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order disguised as care. Every word had been part of a plan. He wasn't asking to share. He was asking to control. When I got home, my phone buzzed with a message from him. It was a photo of a bank brochure. The caption said, "Just in case you want to prepare early." No emojis. No jokes. Just that. I didn't reply. I sat there staring at it, trying to figure out how someone could make something like dinner feel like a negotiation. The next morning, he sent another text. A long one. He mapped out what our finances could look like together. He mentioned budgeting apps, spreadsheets, and long-term goals. He said he could handle the bigger decisions if I didn't want to. It read like a business proposal. No part of it felt like dating. It felt like a contract waiting for a signature. I didn't answer that one either. A few hours later, another message came in asking if I was ignoring him. I wasn't sure what to say, so I told him I'd been busy. He replied instantly with a reminder that being busy was usually an excuse people used to hide things. He said honesty starts early, that silence breeds doubt. I just left it on read. Over the next couple of days, the messages slowed but didn't stop. The last one came at night. It said, "Trust is built through structure. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." There was an address under it, the bank he mentioned. That was when I realized the whole thing wasn't just weird. It was planned. He decided what we were before I even got to decide if I liked him. He'd taken something simple like a meal and turned it into a merger proposal. The thing that stuck with me most wasn't the spreadsheets with talk about efficiency. It was how calm he was while saying all of it. Like it wasn't creepy, like it made perfect sense. The restaurant, the smiles, the quiet tone, it all looked normal on the outside, but under it was something sharp, precise, and cold. I never saw him again. Sometimes I'd pass by that restaurant and see the table through the window, the same dim light, the same old smell of garlic and bread. It looks harmless. But now it just reminds me how something that looks ordinary can hide something controlling underneath it, waiting for someone to sit down and listen too long. Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories. I didn't even plan to go that day. It was one of those afternoons where I almost stayed home, tired, kind of zoned out, but I figured a walk wouldn't hurt. Timmy had texted early, said he wanted to get some air, which sounded harmless enough. We met at this big park near the lake, the kind with long paths, ducks everywhere, and people throwing frisbees like they were in a commercial. He was already waiting by the benches, wearing that same black hoodie he always wore, earbuds around his neck, smiling like everything was easy. At first, it was nice. The weather was decent, and we just talked about random stuff, movies, food, his old car that barely worked. He kept kicking pebbles as we walked, half listening, half staring at his phone. It was one of those chill kind of silences, not awkward but not deep either. He said he liked documenting things, that he was into patterns. I didn't really get what that meant, but I nodded. Some people journal, some take photos. Didn't seem strange yet. After a while, he pulled out his phone again. I thought he was checking a message, but instead he started scrolling fast, almost showing off. Then he said something that didn't click right away. He said he keeps track of all his past dates, like literally all of them. I thought maybe he meant notes about funny stories or something. But no, he meant everything. He said he'd been doing it for years, building a kind of record. His words, not mine. Then he showed me. There it was, folders, each one labeled with names, some just initials, others full names. I read one and it froze. One of the folders had my name on it. The date we met was written next to it, with a number like he was cataloging experiments. Inside the folder were screenshots of our messages, photos from my social media, even a couple of pictures from places we'd gone. He said he kept things organized. He looked proud, like this was something cool, like I'd be impressed. I remember just walking slower, pretending to tie my shoe, trying to process what I was seeing. It wasn't just data, it was me. Every text I'd sent, every picture he'd liked, every reply he'd made was stored there like a digital diary of our entire thing. He said it helped him analyze compatibility. I didn't even know what to say. He talked about how people lie about what they want, how he preferred proof. He said when you track patterns, you learn who fits and who doesn't. The way he said it made me feel like a lab rat, not a person. He said he'd done this for everyone he dated. He even showed me another folder, some girl named Kara. It had timestamps, locations, message histories. He said it was for learning. We passed a group of kids playing soccer, and for a second I just focused on their noise so I didn't have to listen to him. He kept talking though. He said most people waste time guessing if someone's good for them. He didn't want to guess. He wanted data. He said I should be flattered because he never organized someone's folder this early before. Like it was an honor or something. When I didn't say anything, he asked if I wanted to see what he'd written under my name. I didn't, but he opened it anyway. There was a note that said, "Seems stable, low risk, but emotionally cautious." It was like he was profiling me. Under that were little bullet points, stuff like prefers walking over bars, responds slower after 9 p.m., and laughs more when talking about family. It was so detailed it freaked me out. I couldn't even remember telling him some of those things. We stopped near the lake and sat down. He was still on his phone, adding something to the file. I asked what he was writing, and he said, "Current emotional reaction." Just those words, like he was logging me in real time. I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because it was too strange to do anything else. He said he didn't understand why people thought it was weird. He said it's the same as journaling or keeping photos. He said relationships fail because people forget details, and he refused to forget. He said someday, when he meets the right person, he'll have all the data to prove it. That was the moment I realized he wasn't joking. There was no sarcasm, no humor. He truly believed what he was saying. He kept talking about something he called digital transparency. He said couples should have access to each other's files to prevent misunderstanding. He said he'd gladly show anyone his folder because he had nothing to hide. The more he talked, the less it sounded like dating and more like surveillance with feelings attached. After that, I just kind of zoned out. The ducks were louder, the water was calm, and the sun was driving behind the trees. I remember thinking about how small the world gets when someone starts collecting you like information. He must have noticed I'd gone quiet because he asked if I was mad. I said no, I just needed air. He said he could send me a copy of my folder if that would make me feel better. I didn't even know how to respond to that. Who says something like that? A copy of my folder, like it was mine in the first place. We walked back to the parking lot in silence. He didn't seem to think anything was off. He just scrolled through his phone again, saving something, maybe updating the file. Before I got in my car, he said he liked how the day went, that he'd gotten a lot of useful information. Those were his exact words. Useful information. Then he waved like it was a normal goodbye. When I drove home, I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting him to text something else. But I didn't get anything that night. Not until the next morning, when a message popped up saying, "Added today's notes. You came off distant. Everything okay?" That one made me turn my phone off for a few hours. It felt like no matter what I said, he'd write it down somewhere. Like even ignoring him would become data for his next analysis. Later that week, I ran into a mutual friend who mentioned that Timmy had a tracking habit. She said he did it with everyone he met, not just people he dated. Even his friends. He logged birthdays, moods, what people wore, even food orders. She said he called it his memory bank. I didn't tell her about the folder with my name on it. I didn't want to hear more. I deleted his number, unfollowed him everywhere, and blocked him after that. A few days later, I saw a notification that someone had tried to view my profile from an unknown account. Maybe it wasn't him, but it felt like it was. It made me realize how quickly something casual can turn into a system that watches you without blinking. What messed me up most wasn't that he collected data. It was that he thought it meant something. Like numbers could tell him who people really were. Like he could decode connection if he just tracked enough. Sometimes I wonder what's still in that folder, whether he keeps adding to it even now, guessing what I'm doing, labeling me like another project. It's weird thinking there's a digital version of you sitting somewhere in someone else's phone, frozen in bullet points and screenshots. It makes you double think every message you ever sent, every post you ever shared, wondering who's saving it and what they're writing under your name. The morning started too early for a weekend. I almost canceled. It was one of those mornings where the air felt stale and nothing in my closet looked right. Still, I went. Adama had picked the spot, a tiny coffee shop tucked between a thrift store and a nail salon. I hadn't been there before, but she said it had atmosphere. I got there before her, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. The smell of roasted beans mixed with something sweet, maybe cinnamon, maybe the muffins they burned every hour. I liked that it was quiet. She came in about 10 minutes later, fast steps, red scarf, phone in hand. She looked like she was already mid-conversation with someone else in her head. She barely said hi before pulling out a chair and setting down her bag. She ordered something complicated with oat milk and extra shots, then sat across from me already talking. At first, it was fine. She talked about work, her friends, and the meetings she attended every week for her group. I didn't know what kind of group she meant at first. She said they were focused on change. She talked fast, and I didn't want to interrupt, so I let her go. It sounded like one of those community things, activism, volunteering, that sort of vibe. She had that kind of energy that fills every corner of the room. Then she asked what I believed in. I thought she meant like general stuff, fairness, decency, helping people. But no, she meant politically. She leaned in close and started asking who I voted for, while my thoughts were on policies, and what I thought of the cause. I asked which cause she meant, and she looked at me like I'd just failed a test. She said she couldn't date someone without shared alignment. She said it was impossible to build something real if two people didn't fight for the same mission. I tried to laugh it off and said we just met, that we could probably find common ground. But she wasn't laughing. She started listing beliefs like bullet points, watching me while I tried to nod in the right places. Every time I hesitated to raise an eyebrow and tilt her head like she was collecting evidence. It started feeling like a cross-examination instead of coffee. She wanted yes or no answers. I wanted to talk about normal things like music, food, places we'd like to visit. But every topic turned into politics. I couldn't say I liked a movie without her asking if the director supported the right causes. I couldn't mention a song without her checking if the artist had taken a stand. It was like she filtered the entire world through a checklist. She said dating was political, that love was a tool for revolution. I thought she was exaggerating, but she wasn't. She said every relationship either helped or harmed her movement, that neutrality didn't exist. She asked if I'd ever attended a meeting. I said no. She frowned and said, "That's a problem we can fix." She said she expected her partner to show up every week. She said commitment meant participation. She explained how her group met in a community center basement, sometimes at people's houses, sometimes online. She said they planned actions, organized outreach, made calls, and tracked engagement. She said her last partner stopped going after a month, and she couldn't respect him after that. She said relationships fail when people lack purpose. The way she spoke, it wasn't a suggestion. It was like a rule I'd already broken by not knowing about it. Her drink arrived, foam spilling slightly over the lid. She didn't touch it. She kept talking about loyalty, about how the world was full of people who said they cared but did nothing. She said she needed proof, that action mattered more than words. She said she could tell within 10 minutes whether someone had the right mindset. Then she stared at me like she was timing me. I tried changing the topic again, asked if she liked hiking or movies or anything off-screen. She said she didn't waste time with distractions. She said art, entertainment, sports, all of it were tools of control. She asked if I understood that. I said I wasn't sure. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was like she just caught me not paying attention. She started explaining her group's code of loyalty. Members had to attend meetings, contribute financially, and recruit others. She said she'd already thought about what role I could fill. She said I seemed manageable. That word hit strange. I didn't know if she meant it as a compliment or a warning. People around us were laughing, sipping coffee, taking pictures of their cups. It felt normal everywhere except at our table. Her voice was calm, but sharp, like she'd practiced this conversation before. She said dating her came with expectations. That commitment wasn't emotional. It was ideological. She pulled out her phone again and opened a folder full of documents, images, and schedules. She showed me their weekly meeting plan. There were attendance sheets, donation links, and notes from discussions. She scrolled through photos of people sitting in circles holding signs. She pointed at one and said, "These are the loyal ones." Then she asked if I'd be willing to attend one. Not would I like to, but would I be willing? She said we could test my dedication. She said if I refused, it'd be a sign that I wasn't serious about her or the cause. The air inside the cafe felt heavy. People came and went, doors opening and closing, bells ringing, but it felt like the noise was far away. I realized I hadn't taken a sip of my coffee since she sat down. I didn't want to move too fast or say the wrong thing. She said she dated people who didn't care enough, people who talked big but never showed up. She said she wasn't wasting her energy on that again. Then she said something that stuck with me. If you're not part of the movement, you're part of the problem. When I didn't answer right away, she said we could ease me into it, start with smaller meetings, maybe a reading list. She smiled again, and this time it looked forced, like she knew I wasn't convinced. She said relationships need shared sacrifice. I didn't know how to respond. I finished my coffee even though it had gone cold. I told her I'd think about it. She said she'd text me the meeting location anyway. She said once I attended, I'd understand. Then she finally took a sip of her drink, checked her phone, and stood up like the conversation was done. She didn't ask if I wanted to meet again. She just said, "You'll decide after the meeting," and walked out. The whole thing left me stuck there for a while, just sitting with my empty cup. I kept thinking about how a simple cup of coffee turned into a loyalty test. It was weird, the way she spoke about commitment like it was recruitment. I couldn't shake the thought that she didn't want a partner. She wanted a soldier. When I got home, I saw a message from her with a link to a meeting invite. It said, "Tuesday at 7. Attendance is respect." No emoji. No question mark. Just that. I didn't reply. I never went. A few days later, another text came in. "Silence means opposition." That was the last I ever heard from her. Sometimes I still pass that cafe and see people laughing, talking, just living normal lives. It's strange how a place like that can carry such a different weight for someone else. For me, it's just where I learned that some people don't want connection. They want confirmation. It started with popcorn. That smell that fills a theater before the lights even go down, that mix of butter and salt that makes you forget how loud everything else is. Luke had picked the movie. I didn't argue because he sounded so sure about it, and honestly, I didn't care what we watched. It was one of those early dates where you're still figuring out what kind of person someone is, just hoping the night doesn't get weird. He showed up in a dark jacket, hair too neat, smile too controlled. He didn't hug or wave, just nodded like it was a meeting. We walked to the ticket counter, and before I could even say what I wanted, he said we'd do 2 for the late showing, back row center. He didn't ask if I liked sitting there. He handed the cashier a card, took the tickets, and handed me mine without looking at me. Inside, the theater smelled like candy and cleaning spray. We stopped at the snack line, and he asked what I wanted. I said maybe popcorn and a drink. He looked at me for a second and said, "Popcorn is empty calories." He said it like it was a fact, like a teacher correcting homework. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He said if I wanted something, I should pick almonds because they help the brain. I just said okay and got what I wanted anyway. He didn't say much walking to the seats. He just watched people as if he was grading them. When we sat down, he adjusted his posture like he was training for it. He told me he liked observing how people handled themselves on dates. He said you could tell if someone had discipline by how they ate, how they sat, even how they laughed. I thought maybe he was nervous, but the way he said it didn't sound nervous. It sounded like he'd already made a chart about it. Before the preview started, he pointed out my outfit, said my shoes didn't match my jacket. Then he said it wasn't bad, just uncoordinated. He said presentation mattered, that people form opinions instantly. I should be aware of that. I looked down at what I was wearing. Nothing strange, just jeans, a hoodie, regular stuff. He said I had potential but needed guidance. The lights dimmed, and I hoped that would shut him up for 2 hours. It didn't. He leaned close while the previews played and whispered comments about how the people around us were dressed, how they held their drinks wrong, how one guy laughed too loud. He said the world had no standards anymore. He said that's why he was picky. Once the movie started, I tried to focus. I don't even remember the plot now, something with explosions and bad jokes, but I remember his running commentary. Every decision the characters made, he analyzed it. Said he'd never act like that. Said people in real life needed logic, not impulse. He even paused to tell me what he'd have done in each scene. It wasn't loud enough for others to hear, but it was constant, steady, like a stream of evaluation that didn't stop. Halfway through, he noticed I was quiet. He asked if I was upset. I said I was just watching. He said watching passively was a bad habit, that I should engage critically. I didn't even know what that meant in the middle of a movie, but he seemed proud of himself for saying it. When I reached for popcorn, he made another comment, said I ate too fast, said I should slow down because pace shows control. He said people who eat quickly lack patience. I looked at him, waiting for him to laugh, but he just kept watching the screen like it was nothing. I stopped eating. At one point, he started adjusting his jacket sleeve over and over like it was a nervous tic. Then he said he'd noticed I crossed my legs differently every 10 minutes. He said it was a sign of inconsistency. I didn't even know how to respond to that. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't even trying to be charming. It was like he was dissecting me. When the movie ended, he stood up before the credits even rolled and said, "Let's beat the crowd." He walked out like a soldier leaving formation. I followed because it was easier than staying behind. Outside, the hallway was filled with that mix of noise and laughter you always get after a show. He didn't smile. He just said the movie was lazy and the main actor lacked conviction. I said I thought it was fine. He asked me to explain why. I said I didn't know, it was just entertaining. He said, "That's not a reason." He said people should always justify what they enjoy. I told him sometimes things don't need to be justified. He said that's exactly what people say when they lack discipline. Walking to the parking lot, he kept getting feedback. He said he noticed how I walked too casually, how I didn't maintain intentional posture. He said confidence comes from structure. He even said if we kept seeing each other, he could help me refine. He used that word like he was describing a machine, not a person. By the time we reached my car, I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. He leaned against his door and crossed his arms like he was concluding something. He said he had a good time because I seemed open to improvement. He said most people get defensive when he gives feedback. He said I'd handled it well, that it showed promise. Promise, like I was applying for a scholarship. Then he said something that made me freeze. He said relationships only work when one person leads and the other listens. He said he'd be fine leading as long as I was comfortable learning. He said arguments were just signs of immaturity. He said if I ever wanted to grow, I'd have to trust his judgment. I remember staring at him, the parking lot lights flickering on his face, thinking he actually believed what he was saying. He thought he was being helpful. He thought criticism was love. I said goodnight and got in my car. He knocked on the window before I could start it. He said he'd text me later with feedback from tonight. Then he smiled like he'd just done something kind. I sat there for a few minutes after he left, watching people come out of the theater, laughing, throwing popcorn at each other, just being normal. My hands felt tight on the steering wheel. It wasn't even that he'd said something cruel. It was that every word had been about control dressed up as advice. When I got home, there was already a message from him. A long one. He'd written notes from the date. It had sections: appearance, communication, attentiveness. Each one had bullet points. He said it was a useful way to track progress. I didn't reply. The next day he sent another message asking if I'd reflected. I blocked him. Sometimes I wonder if he actually keeps a file like that for everyone he dates. Maybe somewhere there's a list with my name next to potential, uncooperative. Maybe he thought he could coach me into some version of perfection. But honestly, all I think of when I remember that night is popcorn. How it smelled better than it tasted. How simple it was compared to everything else. How something small and ordinary can remind you what control really feels like when it's pretending to be care. I don't know why I remember the sound of her car first. That low idle outside the restaurant, like it didn't want to be turned off yet. Asina had texted that she was running late, said traffic was bad, said I should go inside and grab a table. So I did. The place wasn't fancy. Plastic menus, paper napkins, a smell of grilled meat, and London cleaner mixed together. I sat near the window because it gave me something to look at while waiting. She showed up about 15 minutes later, all calm like she hadn't kept me waiting. She was one of those people who carried herself like time didn't apply to her. Her voice was soft, kind of slow, like she was thinking 3 steps ahead before she said anything. She apologized once, but it didn't sound like she meant it. Said she had just been observing. I thought she was talking about traffic again, but she wasn't. At first, everything seemed fine. We ordered food, small talk started easy. She asked about work, where I grew up, how long I had been in the city. I told her about my street, my neighbors, how I liked the park near my place. She nodded a lot, eyes locked on mine like she was listening hard. I didn't notice anything strange until she mentioned my house. She said, "You have a gray door, right?" I froze for a second because I'd never told her that. She smiled like it was nothing and said she'd driven by earlier. I thought she meant when she was on the way here, just passing through. But then she said she parked for a bit to see how I carry myself. I laughed a little because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She said she watched me leave. She described my jacket, the way I locked my door, even mentioned how I looked at my phone before getting in the car. She said she liked how methodical I was. She said it told her a lot about me. I didn't know what to say. I tried to make a joke about how that sounded like something out of a spy movie, but she didn't laugh. She said she didn't believe in surprises. She said watching someone before getting close to them helps her know who they are without filters. She said people act fake when they think they're being watched, so she prefers catching them before they know. It wasn't angry or obsessive in her tone. It was calm, like she thought it was completely reasonable. She said she'd done it before, too. She said it saves time, said it shows if a person is living authentically. I asked how long she'd parked outside. She said not long, maybe 20 minutes. She said she saw me come out, pause at the end of my driveway, check something on my phone, then get in the car. She said she watched the way I moved, said it told her I wasn't rushing through life. That sentence stuck in my head. Not rushing through life. I didn't even know what that meant in her context. It felt like she was making a study of me. The waiter brought our drinks, and she kept talking like nothing odd had been said. She told me she'd taken a small walk near my street earlier, too, said it was peaceful. She said she liked how my block felt, said it had good energy. She described the tree in front of my house, even mentioned my neighbor's dog. Every detail she gave was something she couldn't have known without being there. I remember thinking about how that morning I'd seen a silver car down the road when I was leaving. I hadn't paid attention. Now I wished I had. She started talking about observation like it was her hobby. She said most people were careless, said they didn't pay attention to patterns. She said she watched everyone she dated for a while before deciding if they were genuine. She said it made her feel safe. Safe. That was the word she used. She said people can hide a lot in conversation, but not in how they move through the world. She said she once watched a guy at his job before going on a date, and when he lied about being organized, she already knew he wasn't. She said she avoided months of wasted time because of that. The food came, but I wasn't hungry anymore. She started cutting her meal into perfect little squares, taking slow, exact bites, barely looking down. Every now and then she'd mention something else she'd noticed about me. How my car was neat but not spotless. How my front porch light was brighter than my neighbor's. How I hesitated before backing out of the driveway. It didn't even sound like flirting. It sounded like a report. I asked if she thought that kind of watching ever went too far. She shrugged and said people exaggerate boundaries. She said everyone leaves clues, and she just prefers to notice them. She said she liked knowing things firsthand instead of waiting to be told. She said she wasn't prying, just verifying. Her phone buzzed once and she checked it quickly. I saw a list on the screen for half a second. My name at the top, bullet points under it. I didn't ask. I just sat there, feeling like I was being studied in real time. Halfway through dinner, she said she didn't trust online dating apps because people lie. She said she never meets anyone without running a check. I asked what kind of check. She said she had a system, social media cross-references, neighborhood visits, little things that help her see real behavior. She said it kept her from wasting energy on pretenders. The more she spoke, the more I realized she wasn't embarrassed. She didn't even try to hide it. She said it was normal to research someone before opening up. She said people should be more cautious, that awareness is protection. She said she liked how my house looked stable. I remember her using that word like it meant something deeper. She said the color choices told her I was grounded. I didn't ask what that meant because I didn't want to hear the answer. When the bill came, she insisted on paying. She said she'd planned to anyway. She said she'd already calculated what she expected to spend tonight, down to the last cent. I didn't argue. As we stood up to leave, she said she'd text me when she got home. Then she said, "Don't worry, I already know the route." I froze again, pretending I hadn't heard that last part. Outside, her car was parked exactly across from mine. Same silver one I'd seen that morning. She unlocked it, looked at me for a second, then said, "You're exactly how I thought you'd be." Then she got in and drove off. I sat in my car for a while, just letting the lights from the restaurant bounce off the windshield. I felt weird, like the night hadn't even happened in real time, like she'd already played it out before showing up. When I got home, I noticed something that made it worse. The trash bin in front of my house had been moved slightly to the left. Not far, but enough to tell it wasn't where I left it. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe not. I didn't hear from her until the next evening. Her message said, "You drive safe. I noticed you parked differently today. That's good awareness." I didn't reply. For days after, I kept checking the window at night. Sometimes I thought I saw headlights slow down in front of my house, just for a second, then fade away. I told myself it was nothing. I stopped going to that restaurant too. Looking back, what still gets me is how normal she made it sound. Like watching someone without them knowing wasn't creepy, it was preparation. Like knowing my habits before I'd even spoke was her version of trust. It made me realize some people don't want connection, they want control dressed up as curiosity. I didn't even want to go out that night, honestly. I'd had a long day, one of those ones that just drags your brain through mud, but Ben was persistent. Said he knew a quiet spot with good food and no crowds. I figured why not? It was a small restaurant on the edge of downtown, one of those places with dim lighting and a menu that tries to sound fancier than it is. I got there first, grabbed a booth near the back, and kept looking at the door while pretending to scroll through my phone. When he walked in, he looked normal enough. Jeans, button-up shirt, that kind of smile that comes too easy. He had this calm way about him that made you think he'd be easy to talk to. I remember thinking it might actually be a relaxing evening. He sat down, took a sip of water, and started chatting about work, movies, all the usual warm-up stuff. Everything felt fine until halfway through the appetizers. Out of nowhere, he asked how close I was with my family. Just like that. No setup, no story leading to it. I told him I talked to them pretty often, a few times a week maybe. He nodded slow, then leaned back and said something that instantly changed the tone. He said he doesn't date people who talk to their family more than once a week. I thought he was joking. Who says that? I laughed, expecting him to laugh too, but he didn't. He stayed serious, looking right at me. He said it wasn't healthy for adults to stay attached like that, said it showed an emotional weakness. He said he believed loyalty should shift completely toward a partner once you're together. He called it resetting priorities. He said when people keep talking to their families too much, it let outsiders influence the relationship. He said it causes division, confusion, and drama. He said strong couples isolate from unnecessary voices. That's how he worded it, unnecessary voices. I told him my family wasn't like that we just checked in because we were close. He nodded again, like he was being patient with a kid who didn't understand yet. Then he said, "That's exactly what they all say." From there, the night turned into something I couldn't even believe was happening in real time. He started explaining how he handles things in relationships. He said once he's serious about someone, he expects total loyalty. He said family ties fade naturally if the relationship is strong enough. I tried steering the talk back to normal stuff, travel, music, work, but he kept circling back. He said if I ever dated him seriously, he'd want proof that I could put him first. I asked what that even meant, and he said it was simple. He said I should limit family contact, maybe once a week at most. He said if my family really cared about me, they'd respect boundaries. I remember staring at my plate, not really seeing it, just hearing his voice like static. He kept going, laying out what he called his relationship standards. He said loyalty was measurable. He said he could tell when someone's heart wasn't fully with him because their priorities would show it. He said people who put their families first never really belong to their partner. The waiter came to refill our drinks, and Ben stopped mid-sentence to smile like nothing strange had been said. As soon as the waiter walked away, he leaned forward again, voice lower. He asked if I'd ever be willing to prove my loyalty. I said, "Prove how?" He said by choosing. He said if things ever got serious, he'd expect me to make him the main voice in my life. He said he'd done that before with past partners, that they became stronger once they cut out distractions. He said it made everything cleaner. I felt my stomach tighten because the way he said it didn't sound like closeness. It sounded like control. He told me about his ex, how she used to call her mom too much. He said it created problems because her mom poisoned her thoughts. He said he finally made her block the number for a few months, and things got better after that. He said he proved she didn't need anyone else. He smiled while saying it, like it was an accomplishment. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak without showing what I was thinking. The food arrived, but I barely touched it. He started eating slow, cutting each bite carefully, talking about how relationships fall apart because people let outsiders in. He said couples should be self-sufficient. He said talking to friends or family about personal issues is betrayal. Then he said something that chilled me. He said, loyalty isn't love until it's tested. He said he liked knowing who would choose him over everyone else. He wasn't angry or loud about it. He said everything in this quiet, certain tone like he was describing the weather. I realized right then he rehearsed all of this. These weren't spontaneous opinions, they were rules. I'd excused myself to the restroom just to breathe. Inside, I stood by the sink for a minute, staring at the tiles. My phone buzzed. He texted already. Don't take too long. I don't like waiting alone. That was the moment I knew the date was done in my head, even if it wasn't finished at the table. When I came back, he was still eating, still calm. He said he'd been thinking about how we could build trust faster. He said communication is important, but only within the relationship. He said outside opinions create decay. His words, decay. Then he started outlining how it could work if we kept seeing each other. He said he'd help me transition away from family reliance. He said we could start small, limiting calls, maybe not visiting for a few months. He said eventually it would feel natural. I didn't even answer. I just nodded again on my untouched plate. He must have taken that as agreement because he smiled, leaned back, and said he could see this going somewhere. When the bill came, he insisted on paying. I didn't argue. He handed the waiter cash, counted it precisely, and said couples should always keep financial control simple. Then he said something like, once we're closer, we'll share expenses. It's all part of building one unit. He walked me to my car after that. The parking lot was quiet except for the buzz of streetlights. He said he'd text me later to check in. Then he said, just remember, I don't share loyalty. He smiled like it was romantic. Driving home, I kept replaying it in my head, trying to figure out how someone could sound so calm while saying something so possessive. It wasn't even what he said. It was how certain he was. Like it wasn't up for debate. When I got home, I had 2 missed calls from him already. The third came while I was taking off my jacket. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail saying he just wanted to make sure I got home safe. But then at the end he said, "I know your family's probably calling. Don't let them fill your head. Just relax tonight." That was the last straw. I blocked his number before bed. The next morning, I found a message request from another account, him again. It said, "You'll understand eventually. Family fades, love stays." I didn't reply. For a week after, I kept checking my phone like something else might pop up. It didn't, but I still think about that dinner sometimes, the calm tone, the way he used the word loyalty like a leash. It made me realize control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in complete sentences and pays for dinner before asking you to prove your devotion. The thing about sunny days is they make everything look harmless. That's what I kept thinking when I saw Peter waving from across the park. There were kids running around, people walking dogs, and that soft hum of weekend chatter that makes it hard to imagine anything strange could happen. He was sitting on his old wooden bench under a tree, sunglasses on, smiling like he'd been there for hours. He had that clean look, white shirt, neat jeans, hair styled like he'd actually used a ruler. I sat down next to him, and he started talking right away. No warm-up, no small talk. He said he'd been making a list earlier. I figured it was something like books or movies. I asked what kind of list, and he said, a comparison list. He said he liked keeping track of how people measured up. I thought he meant job interviews or something work-related. He said no, relationships. I kind of laughed it off at first, thinking it was just some weird joke. He smiled like it was perfectly normal. He said every relationship leaves data, and he didn't like wasting it. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook, flipped it open, and showed me what looked like a spreadsheet, but handwritten. Columns, numbers, names. He wasn't kidding. He had names of women, some crossed out, some underlined. Next to them were numbers and comments written in neat, straight lines. Good communicator. Low consistency. Overly emotional. And then I saw the last name, mine. I felt my stomach twist for a second. There was already a column next to my name with a few blank spots and a header that said TBD. I asked what that was, even though I already knew. He said it was just a system. He said he kept track of things that mattered to him. Habits, goals, self-control, health. He said emotional chaos was preventable if you had data. He said people ruin relationships by relying on feelings instead of numbers. He smiled again, proud of it. I stared at the page, and he flipped to another one like a teacher showing off good notes. It was titled Physical Stats. That's when it really got weird. There were columns for height, weight, eye color, posture, even things like sleep schedule consistency and dietary awareness. Each name had a score out of 10. He tapped his pen against my blank line and said he hadn't filled mine in yet. He said he didn't want to guess. He said he'd prefer accuracy. I didn't even know what to say. I asked if he was serious. He said of course. He said structure was everything. He said people who don't measure what matters end up with disappointment. He started explaining his method. He said he used to keep everything in his phone. The paper felt more honest. He said digital apps track too much and steal privacy, which was ironic coming from someone literally tracking human beings in a notebook. He said it wasn't about control, it was about improvement. He said he could help anyone become their best version if they just cooperated with feedback. Then he asked if I'd mind getting weighed. I thought he was joking again. He wasn't. He said he carried a small travel scale in his car, that it wasn't a big deal, just a data collection. He said he needed it to complete the chart. I told him that was crazy, but he didn't flinch. He said everyone's afraid of truth until they see it written down. He said it wasn't judgment, just information. I told him that wasn't happening, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't argue. He just nodded and said it was fine, that he could estimate based on observation. He said he'd been doing this long enough to get close without numbers. Then he looked me up and down for a second, thoughtful, like a sculptor analyzing clay. He scribbled something in the notebook. He said people's weights change their behavior, that it affects confidence and energy. He said his past partners didn't understand that metrics help relationships stay stable. He said numbers keep emotions in check. He said he ranked everyone by compatibility, and the higher the score, the better the relationship usually went. Then he pulled out a folded paper, another list. This one had all the names again, but arranged by rank. He called it his record of results. I looked down, and sure enough, there were women's names stacked in order with small notes beside them. One said, too spontaneous. Another said, promising but inconsistent hygiene. Another said, unwilling to self-monitor. I sat there trying to figure out if I was part of some prank or experiment. He didn't seem embarrassed or smug. He was calm, completely confident, like this was just how people handled dating. He said honesty without metrics was chaos. When I asked if anyone else had seen this list, he said no. He said it wasn't for judgment, it was for growth. He said he sometimes shared parts of it with people he dated if they asked for feedback. He said most people couldn't handle it. He said maybe I could. The park around us stayed bright and peaceful, like the world didn't notice what was happening on that bench. He told me he'd ranked everyone he'd dated since college, and that patterns always showed up. He said weight and communication style were usually linked. He said people with better posture tended to be more honest. He said he could predict if a relationship would last based on the first 3 data points. I just listened. There was nothing to say that would make sense to him. He asked me if I wanted to see where I ranked so far. I told him I didn't. He said that was fair, but that eventually curiosity would win. He said everyone wants to know how they measure up. He said hiding from truth is weakness. He put the notebook back in his bag, then looked at me with this weird mix of sympathy and pride. He said he could tell I was uncomfortable, but that discomfort meant progress. He said resistance was just fear of structure. Then he started talking about the future like we were already building something. He said if we kept seeing each other, he could track our growth over time. He said it would be nice to have a control couple after so many failed trials. That word, trials, kept echoing in my head. He said he didn't believe in luck, only consistency. He said relationships were like projects. You improve them through analysis. He said emotions fade, but data lasts. I checked the time and told him I had to go soon. He said no problem, that he'd already collected enough for today. Those were his exact words. Collected enough. He said he'd fill out the rest later once he reviewed everything. When I stood up, he smiled again, calm and satisfied, like he'd just finished a successful study. He said he'd text me later with some notes if I wanted them. I said sure, though I didn't mean it. Walking back to my car, I kept hearing the sound of his pen scratching paper in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about all those names, all those numbers, all those rankings. Later that night, he actually did text. It said, good interaction today. Early metrics suggest balance and self-awareness. I'll confirm after further observation. I didn't reply. For the next few days, I half expected to see him at the park again, sitting on that same bench, adding another name to the list. I wondered if he ever read old pages and thought about people as more than numbers. Probably not. Some people collect memories. He collected measurements. And somewhere in that notebook, I'm just another entry filed between too impulsive and acceptable posture. Then she told me about her ex again. She said he resisted improvement. She said he didn't appreciate her evaluations, and that's why he stayed stuck. She said people like that usually repeat the same mistakes forever. She said she tried to help him, but he quit halfway through her system. She said he couldn't handle being analyzed honestly. I kept nodding, trying not to show how off balance I felt. She asked if I'd be okay with her writing down a few things she'd already noticed about me. I didn't answer fast enough, so she took that as a yes. She said, calm tone, good. Defensive humor, needs work. Unclear goals, neutral. She read them out loud while writing. I didn't even know what to do with that. When the waiter came back to check on us, she told him everything was perfect, but then quietly wrote overly polite to staff next to my name. I tried changing the subject. I asked about her job. She said she worked in organizational consulting. Suddenly, everything made sense. She said she taught businesses how to fix inefficiency, and that it carried over into her relationships. She said she couldn't separate her personal and professional life because improvement was part of who she was. I asked if anyone ever told her this might be too much. She said only people who didn't want to grow. She said she didn't waste time on people who refused structure. She said love without systems was chaos. Then she smiled and said, I can already tell this will be productive if you let it. After a while, she started asking about my daily habits, sleep schedule, exercise, communication style. She said she liked consistency and expected her partner to track habits with her. She said it builds accountability. She said she kept weekly charts on herself and her partner to make sure both were improving evenly. She said it stopped arguments because data doesn't lie. It was like talking to a self-help book that thought it was a scientist. I remember her saying, "You will thank me later." She said it with such calm confidence, like she really believed this was kindness. She said people confuse control for carelessness. She said she offers guidance, not dominance. The whole time she kept scribbling. I could see the page filling up with words I didn't say, traits I didn't know she'd noticed. She looked satisfied, like she'd accomplished something. When the check came, she grabbed it right away. She said she liked keeping financial records clean. She wrote the total in her notebook before paying it. I didn't even argue. After lunch, we walked outside. The air felt too bright again, like everything was overexposed. She said she'd send me a digital copy of her notes so I could self-reflect. I said she didn't have to, but she said reflection was non-negotiable. She said, "If we don't measure progress, we repeat failure." She hugged me goodbye like nothing strange had happened, then walked away fast, the same way she arrived. When I got home, I read her message waiting for me. It said, "Attached is your week 1 report. Don't overthink the feedback, it's just data." There was a PDF file attached. I didn't open it. I never saw her again, but sometimes when I'm out eating alone, I catch myself wondering if someone nearby has a notebook with my name on it. The night with David started out feeling casual. It wasn't one of those fancy setups, just 2 people meeting at a bar with sticky floors and too loud of music. He picked the place because they had trivia on Thursdays, and I figured that was a safe enough choice. I got there first, ordered a soda, and sat near the back where the lights flickered, and the crowd noise was mostly background. I remember checking my phone every couple minutes just because I didn't want to look awkward. He showed up 10 minutes late, all smiles, like the type of guy who thinks being late counts as confident. He was wearing a denim jacket and a chain that probably meant something to him, and he kept brushing his hair out his eyes like it was a habit. He was nice enough at first. He ordered drinks for both of us, asked about my week, and started talking about his dog like we were already friends. I noticed right away that he talked fast, like he was trying to fill every gap before I could ask anything back. He said he had a weird day online, which didn't make much sense at first. I asked what he meant, and he said he'd gotten a ton of comments after posting something earlier. He grinned and said it was about me. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He pulled out his phone and opened his social media app. He scrolled for a second, then turned the screen toward me. It was a post, picture of him sitting in the same bar, smiling at the camera. The caption said, "I'm with my partner tonight. She's even better than I hoped." My name was tagged right there in it. Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments saying things like, "So happy for you," and "Finally found your person." We hadn't even ordered food yet. I stared at the screen, trying to figure out what to say without sounding rude. I said something like, "That's kind of fast, don't you think?" He laughed like I was teasing. He said, "Nah, it's just social media. Everyone does it." He said he didn't see the point of hiding something real. He said his followers like seeing authentic connections. I told him we'd only met once before. He said that's what made it exciting, a fresh start that feels meant to be. He showed me the comments again, scrolling slower this time, like he wanted me to be proud. I wasn't. I felt weird, like I just walked into someone else's version of my life. He said he'd already told his online group about me earlier in the week. I asked what group. He said it was a community he ran. I thought he meant a hobby thing or a fan page. He said it was deeper than that, a shared lifestyle platform. He said he started it years ago to help people find alignment. I asked what that meant. He said they share everything: decisions, goals, relationships. He said the group values accountability. He said before posting about me, he asked for feedback from the community. I remember just staring at him, trying to decide if I'd misheard. Feedback about what? He said he'd shown them my profile picture and a few of my posts, and they'd approved. He said that word, approved, like it was some kind of stamp. He said it was important that the people closest to him online felt good about who he was dating. He said it made things smoother. He started scrolling again, showing me messages from people in the group. Some of them had written comments like, "She fits your vibe," or "She looks balanced." I didn't even know what to say. He said I shouldn't feel weird because it was all positive. He said they were excited to meet me digitally. He said he'd probably add me to the group chat soon if things kept going well. He said I'd get used to it. I told him I wasn't sure about being posted online without asking first. He nodded but didn't look sorry. He said, transparency builds trust. He said the internet is just an extension of real life. When the food came, he started taking pictures of both plates. He told me not to touch mine yet because he needed the right lighting. He said our first meal together was content. I sat there, pretending to smile while he moved his phone around like a director shooting a scene. He said I should tag him in the post he'd already made. He said it would balance the energy. I said I didn't really post much. He said he could manage my account for me if I didn't like doing it. He said couples should have digital unity. The trivia host started shouting over the speakers, but David didn't seem to hear. He was deep into his own feed, replying to comments like he was part of the live event. Every few minutes he'd show me another reply. See, they love you already. He said his online group had a rule. Once someone is introduced publicly, they stay loyal. He said deleting a post means breaking trust with the whole community. He said that's why he'd never take it down, no matter what. At some point, I realized I wasn't really on a date. I was just part of a broadcast. When he finally put his phone down, he leaned closer and said he liked how natural I was. He said people online could sense authenticity, and I photographed well. Then he asked what I thought of being in his next video. He said it would be a relationship Q&A. He said it'd help other people see what a healthy start looks like. I said I wasn't comfortable with that. He said I changed my mind once I saw the comments. He said it's addictive, the validation. I tried to switch the topic, but every conversation circled back to his online world. He talked about his followers like they were friends. He said he trusts their opinions more than most people's because data doesn't lie. He said engagement rates reflect emotional truth. Halfway through the night, my phone buzzed. Notifications. People tagging me, commenting, following me. His followers had found my profile and were leaving hearts and welcome messages. I hadn't posted anything, but they already knew who I was. I told him it made me uncomfortable. He said I was overthinking it. He said attention was just energy. He said it meant I was part of something bigger. He ordered dessert without asking if I wanted any. He said he liked when people didn't argue about small things. Then he pulled out his phone again, recording us clinking glasses like we were celebrating something. He said, just smile. It's good optics. By the end of the night, he said he'd walk me to my car. Outside, the air was cooler, quieter. He said he could feel this connection growing fast, that we had momentum. He said he'd post an update tomorrow to show people how real it was. I told him not to. He smiled like I was teasing again. He said, you'll understand when you see how they react. I drove home feeling like I'd just stepped out of someone else's life. The second I parked, my phone buzzed again. New notification, his latest post. It was a photo of me leaving the bar, taken from behind. The caption said, couldn't ask for more. The comments were already rolling in. I turned my phone off. For the next few days, I avoided opening any app. When I finally did, I saw he tagged me in 3 more posts, quotes about trust, connection, loyalty. I blocked him. But sometimes when I scroll through random feeds, I'll see him pop up in someone's comment section, still smiling, still talking about real relationships. And I wonder if the next person sitting across from him knows she's already been introduced to the internet before she's even had her first drink. I met Lily on a Tuesday that didn't feel like it wanted to be a Tuesday. Everything was kind of gray and slow. The rain had stopped an hour before we met, so the ground was still wet, and the air smelled like dust and wet pavement. She picked this modern fusion place she said she loved, somewhere she said felt balanced. I didn't know what balanced meant in terms of dinner, but she sounded so sure that I didn't question it. I got there early, maybe 10 minutes, just sitting in my car scrolling, and when she showed up, she knocked on the window instead of texting. It startled me a bit, but she smiled so wide I couldn't even be annoyed. She looked clean and sharp, minimalist jewelry, dark jacket, hair pulled back like every strand had been planned. The kind of person who doesn't just show up, they arrive. Inside, the place was quiet in that expensive way, with soft background music and those fake plants that cost too much. We sat near the back, by a glass wall that looked out at an alley full of puddles. She ordered for both of us, which I didn't expect. She said she had an instinct for harmony. We started talking about basic stuff first: work, neighborhoods, small details about daily life. She was calm and careful with her words, like everything had already been thought through before it came out. I remember thinking she might be one of those ultra-organized people who keep spreadsheets for grocery lists. Then she said something that made me stop chewing for a second. She said she didn't believe in traditional relationships. She said everyone makes them too tangled. I asked what she meant, and she said she thought long-term couples should live separately. I nodded, waiting for the rest, thinking maybe she meant independence or something. But no, she meant completely separate homes always. She said it keeps people from decaying emotionally. She said when couples live together, they'd lose their edge. She said she'd never merge spaces because that's when control gets sloppy. It sounded strange, but not crazy yet. I said that could work for some people. That space was important. She smiled like she'd just been validated. Then she added, but total digital access is essential. That's when it shifted from interesting to unnerving. She said she believed real connection only happens when people have nothing to hide. She said that's why she wanted her partner to have complete digital transparency: phones, laptops, everything. She said it wasn't about trust, it was about unity. She said living apart builds freedom, but sharing everything online builds honesty. I didn't even know how to respond at first because her tone wasn't joking. She meant every word. I asked what complete access meant exactly. She said she'd expect to have all my passwords, all my messages, all my browsing history. She said she wouldn't look unless she had to, but she wanted the right to at any time. She said it wasn't invasive, it was a bonding agreement. I asked if she expected her partner to have access to her stuff too. She said of course, but then she paused and said most people didn't really need to check hers. She said she had nothing to hide, but she liked to oversee consistency. The food arrived, something with rice and sauce that looked too fancy to actually eat. She didn't touch hers right away. She kept explaining her philosophy like it was a TED Talk. She said every relationship breaks because people create private corners in their lives. She said those corners grow into walls. She said she wanted no walls, just distance physically but closeness digitally. She said she had a past relationship where she and her partner shared every password. She said it was perfect until he started lying about where he went after work. She said she found out through his GPS history. She said that moment proved her theory: digital openness prevents betrayal. I told her that sounded stressful, like living under surveillance. She said no, it was peace. She said people only feel controlled when they have secrets. She said her dream setup was 2 apartments in the same city. She said she'd visit sometimes, but mostly they'd communicate through constant access. She said couples ruin each other by being too physically present. She said she liked the idea of missing someone daily but knowing their digital footprint was always visible. She said she'd even thought about creating a shared data log, something where both partners could see daily activity, screen time, expenses, messages, everything. She said it could be automated. She said it would save arguments because there'd never be unknowns. She called it mutual clarity. I remember looking around the restaurant then, trying to ground myself in something normal. A couple near us was laughing, spilling drinks, messy and human. Lily sat upright, hands folded, calm like a statue explaining rules to a student. She asked how I felt about sharing that kind of transparency. I said I didn't know. She said people who hesitate usually have something they don't want discovered. She said that wasn't judgment, just observation. She said she'd be fine if her partner read her messages, even private ones, because that's what unity means. She said privacy breeds detachment. Then she started describing how she'd structure things if we ever got serious. She said she'd set digital check-ins, daily updates, sync calendars, open devices. She said she'd also prefer to know when and where I was during the day, not because she doubted me, but because it made her feel aligned. She said alignment was her top priority. I told her that sounded exhausting. She said people mistake comfort for chaos. She said efficiency keeps love clean. She reached for her drink, took one small sip, and said she liked my energy. She said I seemed trackable in a good way. That phrase hit weird. I laughed nervously, but she wasn't joking. She said predictability makes her feel safe. After that, she asked what kind of phone I had. I told her. She nodded and said it was compatible with her sensing apps. She said if we kept seeing each other, She could show me how to set it up. She said she'd done it before. She said her ex-boyfriend's phone used to update her about his battery life and screen time. I said that sounded intense. She said it was beautiful. By dessert, I realized the entire night had been her explaining rules, not asking questions. She didn't once ask about my friends, my family, or what I actually wanted. Just systems, access, efficiency. When the check came, she split it down to the cent. She said fairness starts early. She said separate finances create trust. She said every couple should have total transparency digitally, but financial independence physically. I didn't argue. We walked outside. The rain had started again, slow and steady. She said she'd text me later, but not to worry if she didn't right away. She said she liked waiting to see when people messaged first. She said that told her how connected someone really was. When I got home, there was already a message from her. It said, "This was nice. I already added your number to my system. I like organization." I didn't answer. The next morning, she sent another text. "Just checking if you got home safely. You don't need to reply if you're busy. I can see you're online." I turned my phone off. For a few days after, I kept checking my apps, half expecting her name to pop up again. It didn't, but I still changed all my passwords anyway. Not because I thought she had them, just because the thought of someone wanting that kind of access made everything feel less private than before. Now, every time I pass by that restaurant, I think about her calm voice talking about mutual clarity, and I wonder if she ever found someone willing to hand over every password for love. I met Mark on a Sunday afternoon that didn't feel like much of anything. It wasn't sunny or cold, just that kind of in-between weather where everything looks flat. We'd been texting for a few weeks, and he'd asked if I wanted to grab dinner. Nothing fancy, he said, just something easy. We met at this burger place tucked between a laundromat and a tattoo shop, the kind of spot that smells like fries and old air. I remember liking that it didn't feel like a date place. Mark was already there when I walked in. He stood up to wave, tall, hair pushed back, smiling like someone who's comfortable being looked at. He had this calm energy that felt safe at first, like he'd never raised his voice about anything. We ordered food, sat near the window, and started talking about random things. Shows we'd read, music, dumb stories from work. It was fine. But somewhere after the food came, he started talking about relationships in general, like he'd been waiting to bring it up. He said he didn't believe in yelling or fighting. I said that was a good thing, that people should just talk through stuff. He nodded, then added, "I don't be talking during conflict either." I laughed, thinking he meant he stayed quiet until things cooled down. He looked straight at me and said, "No, I mean silence. Total silence." He said arguments should be settled by quiet, not words. He said when two people fight, they should stop talking completely until someone breaks. He said silence tells the truth faster than conversation ever could. I didn't know if he was being deep or weird, so I asked what he meant exactly. He said when a couple disagrees, they shouldn't argue. They should go silent. No texts, no calls, no talking in person. Just silence until one person gives in. He said the one who breaks first is the one who cares more, so it's a fair way to solve problems. He said that's how he measures love. It was one of those moments where you're not sure if you should laugh or leave. I said that sounded kind of harsh. He said it was balanced. He said emotions lie, but reactions don't. He said if you can stay quiet longer, it means you're stronger. He said he used to argue in past relationships, and it always got messy. Then he found the silent day rule, and things got better. He said every argument ended faster. I asked how long his silences usually lasted. He said it depended on the other person's emotional tolerance. He said his record was 9 days. 9 days. I asked what happens if the other person cries or apologizes just to stop the tension. He said that means they've learned. He said tears are part of resolution. He said crying is communication without words. The fries went cold while he explained it like a philosophy. He said silence builds control, and control builds peace. He said talking during conflict only feeds chaos. He said once both people understand that the relationship runs smooth. I tried to shift the topic back to something normal. I asked about his job. He said work was fine, that he liked structure. Then he said that's what he wanted in love too, structure. He said too many people let emotions lead, and that's why everything falls apart. Then he leaned forward a little serious now and said, "Would you be comfortable following that rule?" I thought he was half joking. He wasn't smiling. I said it sounded a bit extreme. He said it's not extreme, it's necessary. He said love without discipline is childish. He said people who talk through conflict never really solve anything. They just talk until they forget why they were mad. He said his rule keeps people accountable. He said once you stayed silent long enough, you stop wanting to fight. You start wanting peace. I asked if that actually worked for him. He said yes. He said his last relationship ended peacefully because of it. He said she cried on day 8, and that's when he knew it was over. The way he said it, calm, almost proud, made my stomach tighten. He said he wasn't partless, just logical. He said everyone has a limit, and silence helps reveal it. He said arguments should end when one person breaks. He said once someone cries, there's no point continuing. It's nature's reset button. He said he didn't like unnecessary noise in life. He said silence shows respect. He said he hoped I wasn't afraid of quiet. I met Mark on a Sunday afternoon that didn't feel like much of anything. It wasn't sunny or cold, just that kind of in-between weather where everything looks flat. We'd been texting for a few weeks, and he'd asked if I wanted to grab dinner. Nothing fancy, he said, just something easy. We met at this burger place tucked between a laundromat and a tattoo shop, the kind of spot that smells like fries and old air. I remember liking that it didn't feel like a date place. Mark was already there when I walked in. He stood up to wave, tall, hair pushed back, smiling like someone who's comfortable being looked at. He had this calm energy that felt safe at first, like he'd never raised his voice about anything. We ordered food, sat near the window, and started talking about random things. Shows we'd read, music, dumb stories from work. It was fine. But somewhere after the food came, he started talking about relationships in general, like he'd been waiting to bring it up. He said he didn't believe in yelling or fighting. I said that was a good thing, that people should just talk through stuff. He nodded, then added, I don't be talking during conflict either. I laughed, thinking he meant he stayed quiet until things cooled down. He looked straight at me and said, No, I mean silence. Total silence. He said arguments should be settled by quiet, not words. He said when two people fight, they should stop talking completely until someone breaks. He said silence tells the truth faster than conversation ever could. I didn't know if he was being deep or weird, so I asked what he meant exactly. He said when a couple disagrees, they shouldn't argue. They should go silent. No texts, no calls, no talking in person. Just silence until one person gives in. He said the one who breaks first is the one who cares more, so it's a fair way to solve problems. He said that's how he measures love. It was one of those moments where you're not sure if you should laugh or leave. I said that sounded kind of harsh. He said it was balanced. He said emotions lie, but reactions don't. He said if you can stay quiet longer, it means you're stronger. He said he used to argue in past relationships, and it always got messy. Then he found the silent day rule, and things got better. He said every argument ended faster. I asked how long his silences usually lasted. He said it depended on the other person's emotional tolerance. He said his record was 9 days. 9 days. I asked what happens if the other person cries or apologizes just to stop the tension. He said that means they've learned. He said tears are part of resolution. He said crying is communication without words. The fries went cold while he explained it like a philosophy. He said silence builds control, and control builds peace. He said talking during conflict only feeds chaos. He said once both people understand that the relationship runs smooth. I tried to shift the topic back to something normal. I asked about his job. He said work was fine, that he liked structure. Then he said that's what he wanted in love too, structure. He said too many people let emotions lead, and that's why everything falls apart. Then he leaned forward a little serious now and said, would you be comfortable following that rule? I thought he was half joking. He wasn't smiling. I said it sounded a bit extreme. He said it's not extreme, it's necessary. He said love without discipline is childish. He said people who talk through conflict never really solve anything. They just talk until they forget why they were mad. He said his rule keeps people accountable. He said once you stayed silent long enough, you stop wanting to fight. You start wanting peace. I asked if that actually worked for him. He said yes. He said his last relationship ended peacefully because of it. He said she cried on day 8, and that's when he knew it was over. The way he said it, calm, almost proud, made my stomach tighten. He said he wasn't partless, just logical. He said everyone has a limit, and silence helps reveal it. He said arguments should end when one person breaks. He said once someone cries, there's no point continuing. It's nature's reset button. He said he didn't like unnecessary noise in life. He said silence shows respect. He said he hoped I wasn't afraid of quiet. The waitress came by to clear the plates, and he smiled at her like nothing about our conversation was strange. I sat there, pretending to scroll through my phone, trying to decide if I was overreacting. Then he said something that stuck. He said he'd already had one small test in mind. He said if we kept seeing each other, he'd want to practice the rule early just to make sure I could handle it. I asked what that meant. He said sometimes he'd stop replying for a while after disagreements to see how I'd respond. He said it was better to test endurance before love got too deep. I told him that sounded manipulative. He said it was the opposite. It was clarity. He said everyone manipulates, he just admits it. He said control is honesty if you don't hide it. He said silence also teaches patience, that after a few days of no contact, you realize what matters. He said crying is cleansing, like emotional detox. He said if you're strong, you don't cry, you just wait. He said relationships should train you to be calm. When the check came, he calculated the total out loud, rounded it exactly, and left a precise tip. He said details reveal character. Walking out, he talked about balance again. He said love should feel like discipline, not chaos. He said too many people chase excitement instead of control. Outside, the air was cooler, but it felt heavier somehow. He walked me to my car, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. He said he liked my emotional stability. He said I seemed like someone who wouldn't panic during silence. I didn't answer. He smiled and said, "That's good. You already understand the rule." Then he said goodnight and walked away like everything was perfectly normal. That night, I lay in bed replaying his words, trying to figure out if maybe I'd misunderstood him. Maybe he just meant space. Everyone needs space sometimes. But the way he said it, the way he believed silence could measure love, it wasn't space. It was control dressed as wisdom. 2 days later, he texted me, "Had a good time." I replied, "Yeah, it was interesting." He didn't text back. A week passed. Nothing. I started to think maybe I had done something wrong. Then one morning, a message popped up. "That was our first test. You passed. You didn't break silence." I just stared at it, half shocked, half disgusted. I didn't reply. Later that night, another text came in. "Communication is earned." I blocked him. For a while after, I caught myself thinking about how calm he'd been, how convinced he was that quiet could fix things. It made me realize silence can say a lot, but it doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it just means someone's already decided they want control, and they're waiting to see if you'll give it to them. It started with pancakes, which sounds normal enough, but somehow nothing about that day stayed normal. Anna had picked this spot that was way too trendy for my taste. Plants hanging from the ceiling, chalkboard menus full of words like artisanal and ethically sourced. She texted me 5 minutes before I got there saying she'd already grabbed a table. When I walked in, she was sitting by the window sipping coffee like she owned the place. She waved when she saw me but didn't stand up. She looked put together in a shark kind of way. Hair pinned perfectly, no loose strands, a white shirt that somehow stayed spotless in a room full of syrup and spilled lattes. She greeted me with that kind of confidence that makes you think she's been rehearsing her own movie in her head all morning. I sat down and ordered coffee. Before I could even open the menu, she started talking, fast. She said she'd been thinking a lot about structure, the kind of relationship she wanted. She said most people waste time playing games, setting soft boundaries, pretending to be chill. She said she didn't do that. I said honesty was good. She smiled like I'd just proven her point. She said she believed love needed rules, clear rules, and she'd rather talk about them now than later. I thought that meant she wanted to talk about small things, communication, scheduling, that kind of stuff. But no. She leaned forward a little, rested her chin on her hand, and said she had one big rule that always scared people away. I told her to go for it. She said, "If I'm with someone, they don't make new friends without my approval." At first, I thought she meant online friends or exes. She shook her head before I could even ask. She meant all friendships. Every single one. I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. She didn't laugh back. She said she wasn't being controlling. She was being smart. She said she'd been burned before. Friends who turned into temptations. People who distracted her past partners. She said love only works when you cut out potential problems early. She said she didn't need drama, just loyalty. I tried to stay calm, asked her what kind of approval she meant. She said it was simple. If I met someone new, especially someone she didn't know, I'd tell her about it first. She'd ask some questions, maybe meet them if needed, and then she'd decide if that person was good for me. I thought she was joking again. She wasn't. She said friendship is emotional currency, and people spend it too carelessly. She said she couldn't stand dating people who let outsiders influence them. She said her last relationship ended because her boyfriend refused to cut ties with an old coworker. She said boundaries were everything. Our food came then, pancakes for her, a breakfast sandwich for me. She didn't touch hers. She kept talking. She said her rule wasn't about jealousy, it was about energy alignment. She said certain people ruin balance. She said she could feel when someone's energy didn't fit. She said that's why she had to approve every connection in her partner's life. She said she'd made a mistake before of letting her partner roam socially, and it always ended in betrayal. She said loyalty meant consistency, and consistency meant control. I tried to steer the conversation towards something normal again. I asked what kind of movies she liked. She said she didn't really watch movies anymore, said they were too full of bad messages about relationships. I asked what kind of music she listened to. She said that depended on who introduced it to her, because she doesn't keep music from people who aren't approved. I stopped asking questions. Then she asked about my friends. I told her I had a small circle, people from work mostly. She asked for names. I gave her a few, thinking she was just making conversation. She wrote them down on a napkin, literally wrote their names, then asked how long I'd known each one. I asked why she was writing them. She said it helps her get a picture. She said she needed to know who had influence over me. She said if this went anywhere, she'd want to meet them eventually. I told her that sounded a bit much. She said, if it's real, nothing's too much. She said she once dated a guy who made new friends without telling her. She said she found out by checking his tag photos online. She said that's when she realized relationships fail when you let too many doors stay open. She said open doors let in chaos. She said it's better to be proactive than reactive. She said people don't realize how dangerous friendly energy can be. Halfway through brunch, she started asking deeper questions. Who do I text most? How often? Do I hang out with coworkers after hours? Do I still talk to exes? I answered short, trying not to feed it. She nodded after each answer like she was grading me. She said I seemed reasonable. She said she could work with that. She said it'd take time to test, but she had a good feeling. She said she had no interest in controlling me, only guiding me. She said freedom without structure turns to chaos. She said love without oversight is blind. I tried to make light of it, said she'd make a good security consultant. She smiled and said that's exactly what she is in relationships, a security system. She said everyone needs one. Then she reached across the table, touched my hand gently, and said, "You thank me later." Most people don't realize how unsafe they are until they lose everything. I didn't move my hand, but I didn't return the gesture either. She let go slowly and went back to her coffee. I asked what would happen if I made a new friend and didn't tell her first. She said that would be a violation. She said violations need consequences. I asked what kind. She said it depended. She said emotional distance usually worked best. She said silence teaches accountability. She said she'd done it before, and it always made her partner come back more respectful. The more she spoke, the calmer she sounded, like she truly believed every rule was love. She wasn't angry. She wasn't insecure. She was sure. That's what made it worse. When the bill came, she insisted on paying. She said it set a precedent. One person handles the structure, the other follows. I didn't argue. Outside, it was too bright to make sense of everything. She asked if I wanted to see her again. I said I wasn't sure yet. She smiled like she already knew that answer would change. She said, "You will be. People always come around when they realize how steady I am." Later that day, she texted me a picture of the napkin she'd written on. My friend's name circled neatly in pen. The message said, "Just doing a little pre-scrigging. It's nothing to worry about." I didn't reply. The next morning, she sent another text that said, "I trust you." But trust grows faster when it's monitored. I blocked her after that. Still, every now and then when I'm out with friends, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see her sitting somewhere nearby and evaluating, deciding who's worth approving. The first thing I noticed about Chris was his posture. Straight spine, shoulders back, like someone had taught him how to sit properly and he never forgot. We met at a small restaurant on the corner of a quiet street, one of those places that smells like garlic and oil no matter what time it is. He picked it because he said it was neutral. I didn't really know what that meant, but I agreed anyway. When I got there, he was already waiting. Menu closed, hands folded, eyes on the door like he'd been timing my arrival. He stood up as soon as he saw me, said hello, pulled out my chair, and sat down exactly when I did. The timing was weirdly perfect. He smiled politely, asked if I found the place all right, and I remember thinking, okay, this guy's just old school polite. We ordered food, nothing fancy, just pasta and drinks. At first, the conversation was light. Work, traffic, how both of us were tired of city noise. He talked slow and careful, like he was running his words through a filter before letting them out. Everything felt rehearsed, but not in a bad way yet. He was polite enough to make you feel listened to, but formal enough that you couldn't quite relax. Somewhere between the appetizer and the main dish, he started talking about communication. I thought he was making small talk about phones or something, but no. He said communication was the biggest downfall of modern couples. I agreed, but then he said people shouldn't talk freely in public at all. I thought he was exaggerating. He wasn't. He said most couples embarrass themselves by not controlling how they speak around others. He said it's a sign of weakness. He said real partnership means discipline, even in conversation. I tried to laugh it off, said something like, so we should just text instead. He didn't laugh. He said, no, we should plan. He said, every couple should have what he called public talking points. I asked what that meant. He said before going out anywhere together, they should agree on what to say and what not to say, just to avoid unnecessary exposure. He said he'd seen too many couples ruin their image by babbling. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. He just kept going. He said partners should speak in sync, like a unit. He said random chatter makes people look disorganized. He said when couples present themselves well in public, people respect them more. He said that respect feeds stability. He said love was about presentation as much as emotion. I asked if he really expected people to rehearse conversations before leaving the house. He nodded and said it wasn't rehearsal. It was preparation. He said smart people plan their words because words can destroy reputations. He said if a partner ever says something off script, it shows lack of loyalty. I thought maybe he was joking or quoting some book, but he was dead serious. He said couples should have shared communication strategies, even small ones. For example, if someone asks a question about the relationship, both people should already know what to say. He said it avoids confusion. He said he had relationships where partners talked out of turn, and it always ended badly. He said people shouldn't improvise when emotions are on the line. The waiter came back with food, and Chris waited until he was gone to continue, like we were in some private meeting. He said people underestimate the power of silence too. He said not everything needs a response. He said sometimes saying nothing is better than saying the wrong thing. He told me about a date he'd gone on where the girl mentioned an ex in passing. He said he didn't talk to her again. He said mentioning the past is off-brand. He actually used that phrase. I tried to eat, but I kept thinking about the way he said off-brand. It made me feel like I was in an interview instead of a dinner. He said that if we ever went somewhere together again, he'd want to agree on topics ahead of time. He said he didn't like surprises in public. He said he believed in what he called controlled expression. He leaned back and smiled then, like he just shared something profound. I asked if that meant he never wanted genuine conversations. He said genuine doesn't mean careless. He said feelings need boundaries. He said people who just talk ruin stability. Then he said something that honestly threw me off. He said relationships are like press conferences. You don't say anything you'll regret later. He said he liked when couples seemed perfectly aligned, when one could finish the other's sentence without contradiction. He said that's what partnership should look like. He said if two people can't manage a conversation together, they can't manage a life together. He said public mistakes are private weaknesses exposed. I told him that sounded exhausting. He smiled calmly and said, that's discipline. The rest of dinner was quiet, but not comfortably quiet, more like sitting across from a teacher during an exam. He asked what I thought of his ideas. I said I wasn't sure yet. He said that's fine, but that I should think about it seriously if I wanted something that lasts. He said chaos only grows when people refuse structure. He started explaining how he and his last partner had scheduled communication reviews once a week. He said they'd sit down and go over what went well and what didn't. He said it helped them avoid messy fights. He said she didn't stick with the system, though, and that's why it failed. He said people call it controlling because they fear order. By then, I'd stopped trying to argue. I just nodded, finishing my drink, pretending I was listening. He said he liked my composure, that I didn't interrupt him once. He said that showed emotional maturity. When the check came, he paid immediately. He said timing shows respect. He said he'd text me later with some conversation parameters for next time. He said it was better to get them out of the way early. Outside, the night was still and quiet. Streetlights flickered. A couple walked past laughing loudly. He watched them, frowned a little, and said, "That's exactly what I mean. No control." He turned back to me and said he hoped I didn't mind structure. He said unpredictability kills connection. I said I'd think about it. He smiled again, that same calm, perfect smile, and said, "That's what I like about you. You listen." When I got home, my phone buzzed. A long message from him. It said, "Tonight was refreshing. I feel potential here. Before our next meeting, I'd like to rely on a few things, topics to avoid, tone, and presentation. Nothing heavy, just healthy boundaries." Then there was a numbered list underneath it. 1. No personal family topics in public. 2. No mentioning past relationships. 3. No joking that involves others at our table. 4. No contradicting each other's statements, even playfully. He ended it with, "I promise it'll make us stronger." I didn't reply. He sent another message the next morning saying, "Silence isn't rejection, it's reflection. Take your time." I blocked him later that afternoon. Sometimes I still think about that dinner, not because of what he said, but how ordinary he looked saying it. How calm control can sound when someone dresses it as structure. How people like him don't shout, they organize, and they call it love. The day I met Megan was hotter than it should have been for spring. The kind of heat that sticks to your back even in the shade. She picked this small ice cream shop downtown. Pastel colors, old wooden stools, everything smelling like sugar and melted cones. I remember thinking it was a nice change from bars and loud restaurants. Something about ice cream just makes a date feel lighter. She was already inside when I got there, leaning against the counter, phone in hand. She looked casual, tank top, jeans, hair tied back, sunglasses resting on her head. She waved, big smile, like we'd known each other for a while. I liked that energy. It felt easy. We ordered me chocolate chip or something fancy with pistachios and caramel and sat by the window. The first few minutes were good. She told a story about her roommate accidentally microwaving metal and almost setting the kitchen on fire. I laughed. She had this quick, sharp way of talking that made everything sound like a punchline. It was nice and normal. Then she started asking about practical stuff. Not in a weird way at first, just casual questions. What kind of place I live in, whether I rent or own, how often I cook. I told her I liked keeping things simple, didn't need much. She nodded and said that was smart, then mentioned how she loved being in charge of her space. She said she couldn't stand disorganization. I agreed. Everyone likes order. But then she said, "That's why I always make the final call on what comes into the house." I thought she meant decorations or furniture. She kept going. She said when she dates someone seriously, she believes in shared structure. She said every household should have one person making final decisions to keep the system running. She said she'd learned that from her parents, one led, one followed, and it worked. She said she preferred being the one who led. I smiled a little, thinking she was half joking, but she wasn't smiling back. She said she'd never date someone who ignored her process. She said she's not controlling, she's efficient. She said she doesn't do chaos. Then she started listing examples. She said she always approves what groceries come in, what furniture stays, even what brand of soap her partner buys. She said it's not about control, it's about consistency. She said if two people start buying whatever they want, the home loses balance. I asked what she meant by approve. She said she has a spreadsheet. She said it helps her keep track of spending and aesthetics. She said partners appreciate it eventually because it makes things simpler. She said, it's not that I need permission, it's that I need awareness. I laughed, but she didn't. Then she said she extends that system to other areas too, like clothes. She said her last boyfriend used to buy cheap shirts, and she couldn't stand it. She said she took over his shopping and made him look presentable. She said he complained at first, but then people started complimenting him more. She said that proved her point. I remember stirring my ice cream, watching it melt, thinking she probably didn't realize how intense she sounded. But she kept going. She said every purchase in a relationship reveals priorities. She said she can tell if someone's emotionally grounded by the kind of shoes they wear. Then she asked what kind of clothes I usually buy. I said whatever fits and doesn't cost much. She frowned. She said cheap clothes reflect poor self-discipline. She said people who invest in quality are more stable. She said she'd help me improve that if we got close. She said she could make me look put together. She talked about finances next. She said couples who succeed share everything, except purchasing authority. She said one person should have final review, and she's best at it. She said she's not bossied, just practical. She said she knows how to allocate resources better than most people. I tried to change the topic, asked about her hobbies. She said she likes organizing things. Closets, drawers, budgets, anything that needs order. She said she finds peace in systems. She said she once rearranged her ex's kitchen without telling him because his workflow was inefficient. I asked how he reacted. She said he was mad at first, but later admitted it looked better. She smiled like that was proof she'd been right all along. Then she said something that made me realize how deep this ran. She said, if we ever lived together, I'd need full say on purchases. Everything, food, furniture, even gifts. It's not control, it's protection. People buy things they regret when they're emotional. She said emotional spending ruins trust. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She said she could tell I was understanding. She said she liked that. She said she dated too many people who resisted structure. She said rebellion always looks cute at first, but it collapses later. She asked if I'd ever let someone else manage my spending. I said no. She said that's why most people struggle. She said I'd thank her eventually. Halfway through the conversation, she started drawing something on a napkin, a chart. Columns labeled needs, wants, and waste. She said it's how she evaluates every expense. She said if a partner's purchases fall into the waste column too often, it means they're emotionally unstable. She said stability means sticking to the needs list. Then she said, I'd add clothing and personal care under needs, but only if I approve the brand. The ice cream had melted completely by then. I didn't even notice until she looked at my cup and said, you shouldn't let things melt like that. It's wasteful. She said people who let things melt usually lack follow-through. She smiled softly, like it was a small joke, but her eyes didn't match the smile. I said I'd been distracted. She said distraction is a habit, not an accident. I tried one last time to shift the tone, asked about her favorite movies. She said she doesn't watch much fiction, it's unrealistic. She said she prefers documentaries about organization and minimalism. She said messy art makes her uncomfortable. By the time we finished, I knew there wasn't going to be a second date. When we stood up to leave, she said she had fun. She said she liked that I listened. She said she could tell I wasn't wasteful by nature, just untrained. She said she could help with that if I gave her a chance. I said sure, just to end the conversation. She smiled and said, perfect. I'll text you a list later. When I got home, she'd already sent a message. It said, had a nice time today. I made a basic improvement plan for you. Start by listing your last 10 purchases and sending them to me. I'll categorize them for efficiency. Then she added a winking emoji as if that made it normal. I didn't reply. The next day, another text came in. You must be busy. That's okay. I'll remind you later. Everyone needs a little structure at first. I blocked her after that. Still, sometimes when I walk by that same ice cream shop, I think about how something so simple, just two people eating dessert, can turn into a conversation about control disguised as help. And I remember how she said it, so calm, so confident, like her version of order was the only right one. That night with Josh started off like nothing special. We met this casual burger spot on the edge of the city, the kind of place with neon lights buzzing over the counter and tables that still smelled like disinfectant. He was already there when I walked in, waving me over with a big grin and a half-finished soda. He looked easygoing, hoodie, sneakers, no effort in his outfit, but somehow it worked. He talked fast, like he was always catching up to his own thoughts, and I remember thinking it'd be nice to hang around someone who didn't overthink everything. The meal was fine. We talked about work, travel, dumb movies, and how he hated people who brag about their gym routines. He laughed loud and often, the kind of laugh that fills the air even when it doesn't quite fit the moment. When I excused myself to the restroom, he said, "Don't get lost," and I laughed, not realizing how strange that would sound an hour later. When I came back, he ordered dessert, 2 milkshakes, one for me even though I hadn't asked. "Trust me," he said. "They're worth it." I didn't mind. The conversation picked right back up, light and funny. For a while, everything felt normal. It wasn't until we left the restaurant that things started to feel off. He offered to walk me to my car, said it was late, said it was what decent guys do. We walked slowly through the lot, talking about random things again. He said he liked knowing people's routines, that it told him who they really were. I asked what he meant, and he said, like when someone wakes up, what they eat, how often they leave their phone unattended, stuff like that. He laughed, but not like it was a joke. When we reached my car, I thanked him and said I'd text him when I got home. He nodded, leaned on the car door, and said, "Good, I'll already know when you're home." At first, I thought he meant he'd be awake waiting for my text, but the way he said it, calm, certain, made my stomach tighten a little. I asked what that was supposed to mean. He smiled and said, "Nothing weird, don't overthink it." Then he said something that froze me for a second. He said, "You'll see." I drove home trying to shake it off. Maybe he just said something stupid. Maybe I misheard. Still, when I got inside, I checked the locks twice. Then I sat down and scrolled through my phone out of habit. That's when I noticed something strange. The location icon was blinking on my screen, even though I hadn't turned it on. My stomach dropped. I went into settings. My phone's location sharing was active. I'd never enabled it. The name next to the shared contact was his. I stared at it, not sure what I was looking at. It said, "Josh can see your location." I scrolled through messages. Nothing about him asking for access. No alerts, just active tracking. I texted him, "Hey, did you use something to my phone?" He replied instantly, "Yeah, I turned on location sharing when you were in the restroom. Don't freak out. It's just for safety." For a second, I didn't even process it. I read it again slower. He said it so casually, like it was a kind gesture. I called him. He answered before the first ring finished. I asked what the hell he was talking about. He laughed and said, "Relax, it's not like I'm hacking anything. It's built in. I just added myself." I asked why. He said, "Because I like transparency." He said he'd done it for peace of mind. He said it helps him trust people faster. He said he'd done the same thing with his ex, and it saved a lot of misunderstandings. He said knowing where someone is builds connection. I told him to delete it. He said I could delete it myself if I wanted. That would tell him everything he needed to know about me. That's when my hands started shaking. He was so calm, so logical about it. Like he couldn't even see why this was wrong. He said, "It's not like I'm stalking you. You think too much." I said, "You went through my phone." He said, "Only for a second. You left it unlocked." Then he said the part that still makes me feel cold when I think about it. He said, "You can't really know someone until you know their patterns, where they go, who they see, how late they stay up. I'm just cutting out the guesswork." I hung up. He texted right away, "You're overreacting. You'll understand later." I went straight into my settings and turned everything off. Location, permissions, everything. Then I changed my passcode. I didn't sleep much that night. Every car that passed outside sounded like someone stopping. The next morning, there were 3 unread messages from him. The first one said, "It's not that deep. Trust is built through access." The second said, "You shouldn't have turned it off. Now it feels like you're hiding something." The third said, "It's fine. I read your pattern. You always go quiet when scared. I'll wait." I didn't reply. Around noon, I got a friend to check my phone. They said the tracking was fully off now, but my name still showed up as shared on his end. Meaning he could still see old data, maybe cache stuff. I felt sick thinking about it. Him sitting somewhere, watching that little dot move on his screen while thinking it meant something deeper than it did. Later that day, he texted again. I don't need to know where you are anymore. I already memorized your route home. That was the last straw. I blocked him. I deleted his number. I told myself that was it. But that night, I kept replaying the moment in the restaurant bathroom. My phone had been sitting on the table, unlocked. It wouldn't have taken him more than 20 seconds to open settings and add himself. The confidence it takes to do that, to cross a line without hesitation, stuck in my head for weeks. For a while, I started noticing little things that made me paranoid. My phone battery draining faster. Apps updating without me doing anything. I even changed phones eventually just to feel clean again. Sometimes I still wonder if he did more than I realized. If maybe it wasn't just location, if he saved something or sensed something I didn't catch. What makes it worse is how calm he was about it. He really thought it was trust, like the act of breaking boundaries was some kind of bonding exercise. He'd said it so simply too. I just added myself. Like it was nothing. Like privacy didn't even exist to him. And sometimes when I drive past that same burger place, I catch myself glancing at the parking lot, half expecting to see his car. Not because I think he's there, but because I can't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone still knows where I am. It's weird how something can start off so normal and still end up being the kind of night that sticks in your head for all the wrong reasons. Laura was the one who picked the restaurant. This small place by the water with paper lanterns strung above the patio and music that was just loud enough to make silence impossible. She said she liked places where people couldn't overhear you. I thought that sounded private in a nice way. I didn't think it meant anything else. I got there first and grabbed a table near the back. The view was decent, the lights reflecting on the river, couples walking past on the boardwalk. Laura showed up right on time, wearing a dark green dress and carrying herself like she planned the entire night down to the minute. She hugged me hello, sat down, and smiled like she was already satisfied with how the evening was going. She ordered wine before I even opened the menu. She looked at me and said, "You don't drink much, right?" I said, "Not really." She said that was fine, that she liked being the one to drink. She said it made her feel relaxed enough for both of us. We started talking about work, about restaurants we liked, about the city. It was easy at first. She was quick and clever, and she had that way of looking at you that made you feel like what you were saying actually mattered. Then somewhere between appetizers and dinner, she asked how often I went out with friends. I told her not much, maybe once or twice a week if schedules lined up. She nodded slowly, taking a sip of her wine. Then she said, "That's already too much." I thought she was joking, but her face stayed serious. She said people waste too much energy on socializing. She said dinner with other people, especially without your partner, was emotional weakness. I didn't even know how to respond at first. I asked what she meant by weakness. She said it was simple. People who eat socially are seeking validation. She said real connection happens in private, between two people only. She said group meals, happy hours, and family dinners were just distractions. She said when you let others feed you, literally or emotionally, you're splitting your loyalty. I laughed awkwardly and said that sounded extreme. She tilted her head and said, "Is it though? Think about it. Every time you eat with someone else, you're giving them a piece of your routine, your rhythm. Why should anyone else get that but me?" I didn't have an answer. She said she'd been in relationships before where her partners ate around. She said it disgusted her. She said food connects people too deeply to share it casually. She said if we ever dated, she'd expect us to eat together exclusively. No meals with coworkers. No grabbing lunch with friends. Not even coffee catch-ups. She said shared meals build intimacy, and intimacy should stay sacred. I tried to play it off like an interesting theory, but she wasn't theorizing. She said she lived by that rule. She said it brought peace. She said her last partner didn't understand it at first either, but eventually he admitted it worked. She said after a while, he stopped wanting to eat with anyone else. She said that's how she knew it was real. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Would you be okay with that?" I hesitated. She smiled. She said hesitation meant I wasn't used to commitment. The waiter came with our food, and she used that pause to shift gears. She said people misunderstand boundaries. She said it's not about control. It's about unity. She said the world tries to pull couples apart by pretending independence is healthy. She said dependence, real intentional dependence, is stronger. She said she didn't believe in splitting energy between different people. She said the most loyal relationships are the ones that shut the world out. She said socializing breeds comparison, and comparison breeds discontent. I was quiet for a bit, mostly just processing. She cut her food slowly, precisely, never breaking eye contact for long. I tried changing the topic, asked if she had close friends. She said not really. She said she'd outgrown most of them. She said friendship fades when you understand how shallow it is. She said she preferred one person completely over many people partially. She said groups make people act fake. She said dinner tables are full of lies. People pretending they're happy, pretending they like each other. She said she didn't do that anymore. Then she leaned in a little, elbows on the table, and said, "If I'm with someone, I want to be their only meal companion. That's how you know you're safe." It wasn't the words so much as the way she said them, slow, steady, like a promise and a warning mixed together. I said I liked spending time with my family sometimes, that Sunday dinners were a thing for us. She smiled in that way that wasn't really a smile. She said family dinners are just emotional rehearsals, everyone pretending they still need each other. She said independence means not needing anyone but your partner. She said if we ever got serious, she'd expect that to change. She said love should fill you up so much that no one else can feed you emotionally or literally. It was quiet for a while after that. The restaurant was getting busier, louder. People laughing, forks clinking against plates, all of it blending together. Laura didn't seem to notice. She looked completely calm, sipping her wine, content in her little bubble while the rest of the room moved around us. She said she could tell I wasn't fully on board yet, but that was fine. She said people need time to unlearn bad habits. She said she'd be patient, but not forever. When the check came, she didn't let me see it. She just put her card down and said, "My treat. I like investing early." As we walked outside, the air felt cooler but heavy somehow. The lights from the restaurant flickered against the water, and I could hear laughter echoing from somewhere down the boardwalk. She stopped walking and turned toward me. She said, "Just promise me something. Don't go out with anyone else to eat this week. Try it. See how it feels." I said I'd think about it. She smiled like that was good enough. Later that night, she texted me, "I hope you didn't eat anything else when you got home. I want you to feel what focus feels like." I didn't answer. The next morning, another message came in. "You'll notice how peaceful you feel when you stop sharing meals with other people. I already feel calmer just knowing you're trying." I blocked her number. For days afterward, every time I sat down to eat with friends or family, I caught myself remembering her words. The way she said them, so sure, so gentle, like control disguised as care. And I couldn't stop thinking about how she'd smile when she said, "You'll feel safe once you stop feeding anyone else." The whole thing started on one of those slow afternoons when the sun looks tired. I'd agreed to meet Sodom for a walk through the park, mostly because I didn't have anything better to do. He'd suggested it himself, said he liked being outdoors, said walking helped him think clearer. I figured that sounded normal enough. It wasn't. I got there first. The park was half empty. Just a few people walking dogs, some kids kicking a ball around, and the sound of wind hitting the trees. It smelled like cut grass and rain that never actually came. Saddam showed up 10 minutes later, wearing this oversized jacket even though it wasn't cold. He smiled when he saw me, that tight, polite kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. He had a plastic water bottle in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. I asked what was in the bag, and he said something special, like he was saving a surprise. I didn't press it. We started walking. At first, it was normal. We talked about random things, the park, the weather, how early it gets dark now. He asked me a lot of questions, too many maybe, but they didn't sound weird at first. Stuff like where I live, what time I usually get home, whether I like sleeping with the window open. I figured he was just trying to keep the conversation going, but his tone was too curious. Not flirty curious, just collecting data curious. About 20 minutes in, we reached this quieter part of the path, trees taller and the air cooler. He slowed down and said he wanted to tell me something personal. I said sure, expecting maybe a story about an ex or family or something. Instead, he started talking about memory. He said he likes to keep pieces of people he connects with. He said it makes them feel closer to him, even after they're gone. I thought he meant pictures, like old photos or souvenirs. Then he said, no, real pieces. I stopped walking for a second. Real pieces. He smiled, still calm. Hair mostly, he said. Sometimes fabric. Whatever captures energy best. He said he'd done it for years, said it started when he was a teenager. He said when people leave, they take their energy with them, but hair keeps it safe. He said he has a box at home, his collection. He said it helps him remember. I laughed a little, hoping he'd join in and say he was kidding. He didn't. He kept walking, talking about how different hair holds different emotions. He said curly hair feels more chaotic, straight hair calmer. He said some people's hair loses energy over time, so he keeps it sealed. Then he looked at me and said, I was hoping I could take a small sample from you today. I stopped again, completely thrown off. I asked what he was talking about. He said it wasn't weird, that it was just symbolic. He said he only needed a few strands, not enough for me to even notice. He said it's how he remembers people he likes. I told him that was not happening. He said I shouldn't be scared. He said I'd be surprised how many people agree once they understand the meaning. He said I had good energy. He said he could feel it from the first time we talked. I started walking faster, hoping to end the conversation by just moving. He matched my pace, still calm, still talking. He said hair carries truth. He said DNA is pure honesty. He said keeping it is a way of preserving trust. I said that sounded like something out of a horror movie. He smiled again, said movies always exaggerate. He said real connection isn't scary, it's intimate. I told him to drop it. He said fine, but I could tell he didn't mean it. He started describing his box instead, like he couldn't help himself. He said it was made of cedar, lined with cloth, divided into sections. He said each person gets a label with their name and date. He said he never throws anything away. I remember my hands going cold, even though it was still warm outside. I asked if people knew he kept their hair. He said some did, some didn't. He said not everyone appreciates the sentimental side of it. He said sometimes it's easier to collect quietly. He said one girl he dated actually liked it. She'd given him a lock of her hair willingly. He said that meant something to him. He said that's what trust should look like. I said he was crossing boundaries. He said boundaries were fake, created by people who fear real connection. He said modern dating is too shallow. He said he wanted something authentic. Then he asked again, softer this time, if I'd let him have just a few strands. He said he had scissors in the bag. That's when I realized the something special he mentioned earlier wasn't a gift, it was preparation. I told him no firmly this time and started heading back toward the main path. He followed for a bit, not saying anything. Then he said, you'll regret not letting me remember you properly. He said memories fade, but physical pieces stay honest. I didn't reply. I just kept walking, faster this time. I could hear him still talking behind me, saying I didn't understand, that I'd see the meaning one day. When we reached the crowded part of the park again, he stopped following. I looked back once. He was just standing there, holding that paper bag, watching. I didn't look again. When I got to my car, my hands were shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice before unlocking the door. I sat there for a while, trying to convince myself it hadn't been as bad as it felt. Maybe he was just eccentric, just saying weird stuff to impress me. But then I remembered how casually he'd said it, how natural it sounded coming out of his mouth. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from him. It said, you left too fast. I didn't get to say goodbye. I'll remember you anyway. Then another one right after, don't worry, I already got what I needed. I didn't know what that meant. I hadn't seen him touch me, hadn't felt anything. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I went into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and ran my hands through my hair like I'd find missing strands. The next morning, he texted again. You shouldn't be scared. I keep things safe. You'll always be part of something meaningful now. I blocked the number immediately. Even after that, it took days before I could walk through that park again. Every time the wind blew through my hair, I thought about his words. How he said hair holds energy. How he said he'd remember me. And I still catch myself wondering what was in that paper bag. The night with Chloe started off easy, simple, no weird vibes at all. We met at this small cafe that served desserts way too fancy for the size of the plates. She picked the place because she said she liked quiet corners. And honestly, after a week that felt way too loud, I didn't argue. I got there first, grabbed a seat by the window, and started scrolling through my phone. When she showed up, she looked relaxed. Hoodie, messy hair, no makeup, and I thought, finally, someone normal. She ordered a piece of cheesecake before even saying hi properly. I laughed, said that was a bold move, and she smiled like she'd been waiting to hear that exact thing. She had this calm kind of confidence, not loud or flirty, just comfortable in her own silence. We started talking about small stuff. Movies, bad dates, favorite foods. The kind of surface talk that fills time but doesn't ask for too much. It stayed easy until the waiter dropped off dessert. She had her cheesecake, I had a slice of chocolate pie, and everything felt steady. Then right as I took the first bite, she leaned forward on her elbows and said, "Can I ask you something serious?" I said sure, thinking it was one of those deep but safe date questions, something about family or life goals. Instead, she said, "Do you delete your messages often?" I paused mid-bite. It caught me off guard, but I said no, not really. She nodded like she was analyzing the answer. Then she said, "So your messages are all still there?" I said, "Yeah, most of them." She smiled, took a forkful of cheesecake, and said, "That's good. I like transparency." I didn't think much of it yet. She started asking about apps, Instagram, texting, group chats. She asked if I used disappearing messages. I said sometimes, but not for anything shady, just random stuff. She nodded again. Then she said, "I don't like when people keep secrets digitally. It makes me nervous." I told her I got that. Everyone's been burned by someone lying online. She agreed, said trust was everything. She said she had a rule, total digital honesty. No hiding, no private conversations, no secret accounts. She said she believed love dies in deleted messages. I told her that made sense in theory. She said she didn't just believe it, she lived it. She said she always has access to her partner's messages. I asked what she meant by access. She said she reads them. Not to spy, she said, but to stay connected. I tried to laugh, thinking she was being dramatic, but she wasn't smiling. She said she doesn't believe in privacy between partners. She said people lie most through their phones. She said if someone's serious about her, they wouldn't care if she looked through everything. She said checking messages isn't mistrust. It's maintenance. I didn't say anything for a second. She filled the silence herself, talking fast like she'd explained this before. She said she'd done it in her last relationship, that it actually made things better. She said once she started reading his texts, they stopped fighting as much because she already knew what he was thinking. She said love shouldn't require guessing. I asked if he'd agreed to that. She said he didn't at first, but eventually he understood. She said he got used to it, he even started showing her things before she asked. She said that was real trust. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Would you let me see your messages right now?" I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I said, "Like right now, right now." She nodded, calm as ever, like she asked if I wanted to share fries. I said no, trying to sound casual about it. She tilted her head a little and said, "Why not? If there's nothing to hide, it shouldn't matter." I told her it wasn't about hiding anything. It was about privacy. She smiled, small and slow, like she caught me in a lie. She said, "People who say it's about privacy are always hiding something. Trust me, I've tested this." The air between us changed then, quiet, heavy. I pushed my plate away. She didn't look mad, just focused, studying my face like she was watching for tells. She said she didn't mean to make me uncomfortable, that she just believed in building honesty from day one. She said most people lie without realizing it. She said habits of secrecy form fast. She said she just wanted to be sure we started right. I said we'd only known each other for an hour. She said that's exactly when truth matters most. Then she took out her phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table toward me. She said, "Here, you can look at mine. Everything's open." I didn't touch it. She said, "See? That's how I prove loyalty. No passwords, no barriers." I said I didn't need to see her phone. She smiled wider and said, "Then show me yours. It's only fair." At that point, I wasn't even sure what to say. I told her I didn't like being tested. She said it wasn't a test. It was a foundation. She said, "If we're going to connect, we should remove all middlemen, especially technology." Then she reached her hand out, palm up, waiting for my phone like this was normal. I said, "Chloe, that's not happening." She sighed like I was being dramatic. She said people always say that at first, but she changes their minds eventually. She said it's just fear. She said I'd understand after I saw how peaceful it feels when everything's shared. I said again that no, she wasn't getting my phone. She leaned back, still calm, and said, "It's fine. You'll get there." She finished her cheesecake quietly after that, like nothing had happened. I just sat there waiting for the check. When we left, she bade me goodbye to all smiles again. She said she had a nice time, that she liked how honest I seemed. Then she said, "You'll text me when you get home, right?" I said, "Yeah, sure." She said, "Good. And keep your phone close. I don't like when people go silent for too long." I nodded and got in my car. By the time I got home, she'd already texted, "Just making sure you're not talking to anyone else right now." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, "You must have gotten distracted." "That's okay. I'll wait." Then another, maybe 20 minutes after that. "You'll see, I just want to make sure no one's wasting time lying to each other. Then, it's better if I have access. Trust me." I blocked her number right then. For a few days, I half expected to see her name pop up from another number, but it didn't. The text stopped. Still, I couldn't shake how steady her voice had been when she asked for my phone. No hesitation, no embarrassment. Like she truly believed that privacy meant betrayal. Sometimes when I'm scrolling late at night, I think about that moment, her hand stretched out across the table, palm up, patient. And I wonder how many other people actually gave in.